Welcome to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news, interviews, and race reviews. I'm your host, Gabe, and today I have a very special guest with me, friend of the pod, one half of Knockoff McLaren, the wonderful Tiernan. Hello, Tiernan.
Hi Gabe, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. I kind of rushed out here a little bit because I picked up Lauren from the airport yesterday, and just I set my alarm, but just you hit the snooze a few times, especially when it's like a late night flight. And so yeah, I just I'm not gonna say I drove excessively, but I may have just a slight bit, just a smidge, just going with the crowd, just going with the
Sure.
crowd.
Go with the
How are
flow.
you doing this morning? I see you have your tea.
It's coffee today.
Oh, it's coffee. Okay. All
Uh-huh.
right.
I'm doing well too. I watched the race live, which is something I when I lived in Chicago, I watched most of the races live because they would
Mm-hmm.
play at 6 a.m. and I'd get up and do that, um, and then go back to bed later. And now that I live on the West Coast with you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in San Francisco, you're in Portland.
Yep.
It's really I'm not gonna get up at 4 a.m. to watch
No.
one race.
No.
No, so it's a special treat. My friends and I made sushi and drank sake, and
Oh, that's
I
great.
enjoyed the race. It was a great race. So all in all, 10 out of 10 experience.
Nice, nice. What have you got going on? Like, what could be a little life update since you were on the
Like,
pod last? Like, what's the new big things going on in your life?
actually, I have quite a few big things going on in my life, and I know you do too. So let's get it. I want to interview you back. I have some questions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but
All
my
right.
first big, you can cut it out if you don't like it.
Oh no, I'm leaving it right in. I like being
Okay,
interviewed. I don't get
okay.
it doesn't happen often.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my first big life update is one that has been in the works for a long time, but I got a new job.
Yes, nice.
Yep, I'm really excited about it. Shonali and I, my Shonali, my other and I were friends, but then founded a nonprofit together, and we built it and ran it for 6 years.
Hmm.
And it was a dream come true, and it we hit a point though where it was time. It felt like time for me to do another thing,
Hmm.
um, and I got so lucky because Shonali had been finding her dream job. So Shonali has taken over as executive director of Spark Shop. Exciting for the company, exciting for Shonali. She is running it all on her own. Um, and I got a job working as a they still haven't picked a title for me. I start
Oh, okay.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep. So that's funny, but it's a product management and like technical project management type of job at Zipline, which is a company that is uh, using drones to make deliveries more accessible.
Oh, okay.
Locally, yeah. So I don't know if you've seen any videos of the little airplane shaped styrofoam drones that deliver blood in Ghana and Rwanda. But
No.
we'll
They're
get
made
into
of
it.
styrofoam?
They're made of styrofoam because they're
Wow.
super lightweight, super low cost.
Wow, that's awesome. I've seen the
Yeah.
ones that have like they're almost like they've got like four propellers and they usually have like a box in the middle and like they kind of I've seen that.
Okay.
I know that like they tried doing some of that domestically, but like people were like shooting them with guns
Yep.
like and I know that
Yep.
was like a huge problem because of
Yep.
course human beings in America are going to do that.
Yep.
Um but no, that's fascinating. That's awesome. So they're trying to do you have a title that you'd prefer? Do you have like a fun one? Like
Oh.
project like projects I don't know project badass leader or
Yeah. I think
um
it's gonna be fire putter outer.
fire putter outer.
Fire putter outer, which is like my kind of favorite thing to do, something a little different every day.
Hmm.
Sometimes super technical, sometimes super high level strategy.
Hmm.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna be working on is what's called like it's so you got the drone, but they have a whole business around the operations and the delivery and the infrastructure. So I'm not actually working on the drone. I'm working on the counterpart to the drone, which is the ground systems,
Oh,
everything
okay.
that launches the drone, charges the drone,
Oh,
so allows you to service and access it.
okay.
Um, and then yeah, and so they right now have these little they have drones that are delivering mostly medical supplies in parts of the world where hospitals aren't very road accessible. Um, but they are working towards. Did you watch Parks and Rec?
I did.
Did you see in the very last season when Grizzle, the fake tech company, started
Oh
using drones
yeah.
to deliver stuff to people? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The Zipline is working on the consumer drone, the one that will deliver uh, cold medicine to your house or your salad or your burrito or your order
Oh,
from right. They're working on the like domestic commercial version.
okay.
Um, with the long term, vision of getting cars off the road.
Mm. I see that. You see,
Yeah.
it's funny. Like when you talked about that, my first initial thought was I have these weird conflicting feelings sometimes that come up with it. Like when it comes to like automation and robots and like AI and stuff, and like I do believe that they have their place in our future. I really, but I think that like the where the line gets drawn for me is when like it starts to cross over the path of like this is like something that's uniquely human that like
Mm-hmm.
really humans should be the ones doing. So like for
Mm-hmm.
example, delivering like medical supplies to like remote areas, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Somehow maybe like dropping, like if you have a giant drone or like a drone airplane that can drop water over like a hot area or something, like something that's like emergency services, or things that like you said, like kind of helping with environments, like kind of reducing emissions, because we're going to have to do that. That's great. Where I have a problem is where it starts to get into things that humans do that are not related to like art. Like I
Yes.
don't like when it gets involved in art, because art is such a human thing, or like music or sports. I mean, well, we can relate it to Formula 1. I wouldn't want to watch Formula 1 if it was all robots racing, unless they were like unless it was like that sort of like you ever play F-Zero on Nintendo with like Captain Falcon as like the character in it?
No, I wasn't a video game
Oh,
kid.
that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
So F-Zero is basically like it's like it's where Captain Falcon comes from, and it's essentially like a hovercraft, hyper futuristic. Like they go like 800 miles an hour, and they're like going like inverted and like jumping over lava and stuff like that. If robots did that, that would be hyper exciting. But
That'd be
like,
interesting.
because I know that there's no risk of a human dying. So like know
Right.
but yeah, no, that's absolutely awesome, and I think you should maybe I think if your focus is like the sort of the infrastructure of like where they land and like them being recharged and something, maybe like something like master control, like
Mm.
you're I'm like Tiernan, the home base control master or something. Like that seems kind of like a badass title. um
Ooh. We're gonna
but
have to
I'm
work on it. They literally said to me, "We don't care what you put on LinkedIn," so we'll see.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I'm all for the creative, like make your own title. That's phenomenal. I'm kind of experiencing that a little bit with my work right now. So
I wanted to ask you, you got a new job. Will you tell me about it? You teased it on the pod last
I
week, and you
did.
the detail. Tell me about it.
Okay, so to make a long story short, while I was at my old job, I got a call from a place that I had sent a resume to a long time ago. And I was like, why are they calling me? And then I answered the call, and it was, for a pretty incredible job offer as a full time guitar technician. So, like, this is the job that I was hoping to get when I moved out to Portland. Like, this is like what I went to school for,
Yeah.
was like building. And I went there, I did interviews, and everything, the process got expedited really quickly. Like everything clicked into place really nicely. And so I mean, it's a much better, it's a big bump up in pay, it's a big bump up in my skill set. I
Yeah.
mean, even after being there for like a week, I already like my skills were just like, I was like, oh, yep, 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 and it just started going up, and it's only been going up every time. So
But
yeah, it's at a guitar shop in a kind of northwestern, kind of a little more west of Portland. So the only downside is that my commute is like a 50 minutes like on average, and
yeah,
that's not great.
it's not.
um but yeah, we're having a similar sort of thing where like my position, what's really nice is that the store does this process where it's not only just like a technical like sort of step by step, but it's also like physical. Like the guitars enter in this door and then they go past this guy who checks them in, and then they go over to this room over here where like they get tech inspected by me, and then they go right next, like literally right next to it is the little like internet room where they take photographs of it and post it on the internet, and then it goes to the show floor. So it's like this whole little process.
Wow.
And as of right now, the internet like online e-commerce team and then us as like the tech area, like they want us to like come up with like a unique name for the groups separately. So we're like sitting there trying to figure out like maybe it should be an acronym, or like maybe it should be this. And like I think the
Shred.
guy, what?
Shred. That's the first acronym that comes to mind. What is it?
Shred. Oh
Yeah.
god, what could shred be?
Service.
Service repair. Oh, this is good. Yeah, service repair, or service hand repair. Ah, god, I'll have to think of that. That's good though. Oh, that's a good starting place. um I the e-commerce room, they were thinking of they were working on some acronyms, but like they're trying to avoid certain buzz rooms. I just said like you should call your guys just like the, I don't know, the 5-star skunk works or something, like, you know, just kind of like this, the like inner team and the inner team or whatever. um but yeah, it's been hugely exciting, and it's literally the job that I've been looking for pretty much like my whole time that I've come
Good.
out here. So it has
I'm so
become the
happy.
priority. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so happy for you. And like how, I mean, I also am a person who plays guitar. It's been a minute.
Yeah. Hmm.
But like nothing is better than having a trusted team of technicians when
Yeah.
something goes wrong. And like
Hmm.
I've seen some bullshit in the back rooms of guitar shops. So
Oh
like
yeah.
I am so happy for you that you get to work among a team of experts, and that you get to like really step into that expert role and feel that for
Oh
yourself.
yeah. No, I've been getting a lot of positive affirmation from it, from all the team members and stuff, which has been,
You
yeah,
just
it's
started
been,
and took off with it
yeah,
from
it's, yeah.
from
Yeah, my, I feel like in so many ways this year my life has just like improved exponentially, and just like, you know, gotten so much better, like just, you know, leaps and bounds.
yeah.
It's, you know,
I
it's
can
been
imagine.
fantastic, you know.
I'm so glad to hear that. You
Yeah,
said you're
well,
having car problems. I just washed and cleaned my car, rotated
mm,
the tires, did the like now I have a commute, got to get ready for it thing.
oh yeah. Yeah, I my car, oof god. Yeah, I my brakes are on the screechers, and I definitely need to get some service done. I'm at that point where I'm thinking like, you know, my hope was eventually to be able to replace my car with something a little newer, because I've had it for like 10 years. But now it's just like, well, if I'm going to do that, I got to save, and in order for me to save, I have to be able to get to work. So good thing is that it's also a job that's very flexible with their hours. So I was just like, hey, like I might have to take off a day to like get my car serviced, and they're just like, oh yeah, no, of course, just let us know. And I'm like, yes.
Healthy
It's,
work environment. We love to see it.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's always great when it's like people. It's about people. Um, well, Tiernan, so I'm super glad that like both of us are sort of in this like forward trajectory into our futures. And it's sort of interesting to when we talk about like where we've been to where we are now. Um, it is, you can sort of make a similar kind of, we can kind of have a similar discussion about this Japanese Grand Prix, and sort of where certain teams may have started at the beginning of the year and where they are now, and just the I mean, honestly, I'm talking about McLaren.
Talking about
That
McLaren.
glow up, I mean,
Talking about McLaren.
well, let's get into it. So obviously today you are here to help talk to me about the talk with me about the Japanese Grand Prix, which happened. um it is a definitely a historic, iconic race of the season. One of the one track that almost universally every driver loves. And it's really not hard to see why. It is just an incredibly technical track. There's a lot of really intense aspects. There's high speed, there's swooping curves, there's heavy braking zones, hairpins. It's a fantastic place. Just really quick, I'm just going to give a little track background. Okay. So the name of the official name of it is the Formula One Lenvo Japanese Grand Prix 2023, which is a lot more tame than some of the other races that are in this calendar. um, it's held at the track is Suzuka International Racing Course. It's in Suzuka City, which is in the Mai Prefecture, MIE. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. In Japan. Its first race was in 1987, won by Nigel Mansell. The race kind of runs sort of in the late afternoon. The driver that has the most wins is Michael Schumacher with 6, which is a pretty common occurrence with a lot of these tracks. It's like either Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton. And here's a fun thing about this track, 'cause I actually learned a couple of things. So I knew that this is Honda's test track, right? And it was commissioned by the founder of Honda in 1962. It's the only track on the F1 calendar that's counterclockwise and clockwise because it has that crossover.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know is that when it was originally being designed, the original designer wanted to have 3 crossover sections. Like, you wanted it to cross over 3 times, which I don't know if that would be good or bad. Oh, hello, Linus. My cat Linus just walked in.
Oh,
He
hi,
has
Lena.
something to say. But yeah, it originally had 3 crossovers, and I just don't know how that would have worked. I think more tracks should have a crossover, but like that might have been a little too excessive.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to imagine the implications to tire wear. That's like one of
Yes.
my first.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because it's like it would sort of really affect both at the same time with the counter. Ooh, I didn't think
Well,
of
this
that.
this circuit theoretically does more than anyone else, right? Given that it is both clockwise and counterclockwise for sections, and
Hmm.
I'm just like spinning, trying to mentally calculate what it would look like if it had 3 crossovers.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like they would have got been longer, or like I don't even know where they would have put the other crossovers around.
Right.
Like it would have been, it would have almost been like a Mario Kart track. I know I keep bringing up video games, but
But
like,
listen, I played Mario Kart. It also like I mean tracks used to be longer. Like
right.
circuits used to be longer in general. So if they were commissioning this in the early 60s, I could see a bigger circuit that gets
Yeah.
over time, but
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. Yeah, they were definitely longer, but a lot of those tracks too were also like not very particularly interesting curve wise. Like Belgium just went off into the trees and just kind of circled back. Like it's not like there was a bunch of crazy turns and chicanes. They just kind of just went out there and then returned. I think the only one that really had a lot of crazy turns that was also long was the Nürburgring. Because that thing's got like, oh my god, I don't know. I remember how many corners, like 60 some odd turns or something like that. It's crazy. It's a crazy amount
well,
of
and the
curves.
story of how they built the Nürburgring was that it was a public works project, and they set out to make the most difficult to construct track
Mm-hmm.
that they could because it would
Mm-hmm.
employ most people for the longest amount of time. They were like, "Where is it hard? Go cut
Wow.
down that forest, go over those hills, figure it out." So I think that creates an interesting implication. Like, what's going to be hardest to build is so rarely the way we approach our construction projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's like a big criticism people have of Herman Tilke when he makes these tracks. I mean, he's got quite a few that are pretty good and iconic, but the ones that the big criticism he has is a lot of them are just very cookie cutter and they're just very basic. Like they're not doing anything that's too interesting or challenging in a way. It's kind of predictable. And Idris and I have talked about this too, where I just think that like the most interesting tracks, and Suzuka is a good indicator of this too. It's just that it's really at its best when it's like going through the natural environment. Oh, here's Linus.
Oh,
Um,
hi.
Here, you want to say hi, Linus? Here, say hello.
Oh, what a cutie.
he's
Oh.
Yeah, he's just he doesn't know I'm recording a podcast, do you, buddy? No, you don't. Um, but yeah, Suzuka definitely it has a lot of, it goes along with the natural formations of the land around it. So I think that's really part of the reason that it's such an interesting track. that it is. Apart from the crossover, which I just think they need to do more crossovers.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fun.
do you think in the future, speaking of kind of your new job and your position, do you
Mhm.
think in the future that there would be any sort of like application for like sort of drone traveling or delivery things like in a Formula One sort of context, like picking up debris off the track, maybe, or
Oh,
like what do
that's
you
interesting.
think?
So, oh, that's interesting. I have not thought about it for 1 second. Not historically someone interested in drones, but um, now that you ask it, I love that because that would be so much safer for marshals to
Yes.
not be running out onto the track. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think anything. I mean, they're already using drones quite extensively in the filming.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the, you know, in sports, one of the most quickly accepted things. But I also think I could see potentially in the context of European races, if
Mm-hmm.
drones for, you know, stuff delivery, if that technology develops quickly enough and the range that those vehicles can travel develops quickly enough and the payload that those vehicles can carry
Right.
enough, I think I could see instead of packing up all of your stuff onto a truck and driving it around, continental Europe,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a strong potential application on the logistics side of things
Mm.
to reduce the impact of F1 in the
Yeah.
sport. Something they're working really hard to do is to like reduce the climate implications of Formula
Yes.
One. And at the same time, they're adding new circuits. They're
Mm.
adding new races. The season's getting longer and longer, and so they're gonna have to do something aggressive to undercut the logistical hurdles. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that
I
makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really the big thing, isn't it? Like it's not it's like they're doing a lot of stuff to try and reduce their emissions and make things more efficient, but the biggest hurdle is the fact that like the racetracks cannot just adapt their whole schedule around one race event, right? They have a bunch of different events. And there's also different seasons. Like you cannot race at Abu Dhabi in the middle of the summer. You just can't. And so like you have to like accommodate for those different schedules. And so like the calendar is just kind of all over the place. That's one thing I do enjoy about IndyCar is IndyCar is kind of a little more green in that way because they're only really going domestically. They're not going like internationally.
Yeah,
Um, but
but
I
at
was
the same
also,
sorry to chime in and interrupt. At the same
yeah,
time, the United States is gigantic, right? So like
it's true.
traveling across the United States, it doesn't feel to me much better than like traveling across Europe and the Middle East. The thing with F1 is that it is like truly fully global, and so you have the race in Japan, you have the races in the United States and in Canada, so like,
Right.
and in Brazil and all over the place. So I think it's it's a IndyCar is closer. IndyCar is doing less, but it's
Hmm.
still. I think I have a tendency to forget how big the United States is, and when
It's
people
true.
have
Yeah.
the critique of, oh, 3 races in the United States, that's crazy. Those races are farther apart than most of the European races are from each other. So,
It's true. Yeah, I just wish that they would race in more interesting places than like Vegas and Miami. I
oh,
just,
I also that. I wish that they were using historic United States circuits. I want Indy to come back. I think Laguna Seca would be really fun. Like,
mhm.
I think it's a missed opportunity to do these like pop-up street races in
Yeah,
cities that are just about partying and spending your money.
right. Well, and I think that there is enough tracks in America that could be have whatever they need to be adjusted to make it like an A1 track for an F1 to race on. I mean, we have Coda, so that's like a purpose built. But like you have Sonoma. Sonoma's pretty close. Like
Yeah.
that I can imagine as being a really decent F1 track. It's got enough interesting thing elements to it. 100% I agree. Laguna Seca would be really cool to see. I still wish, like, I mean, they're never going to race at Portland International Raceway unless they like completely redo the entire track, which they're not going to do. But it would be nice if they had like if they built a track up near Seattle or something. Like, I'd 100% make like a trip up there.
Well, and here's the thing that is, a little maddening about it. the cost that it takes, for example, to put on the Las Vegas Grand Prix, they're building now. They're closing down tourist attractions today to get
Mm-hmm.
ready for the race at the end of November. Um, with that kind of infrastructure investment, the Portland International Speedway could also become an A1 track, right? Like, I don't think it's out of the question. It's really a question of like who has which because of how we do funding and things, like who has the
Yeah.
local money to invest in it and who's willing to invest in it. But I do agree with you. I would love a Pacific Northwest race.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it would be so much. I mean, it would be so much better for me because then it's like, oh, I can go to an F1 race and not have to like dump out a whole bunch of money. But that's another reason why. Just going back to this new job, another reason why I'm very grateful for this job is like I don't get like with the benefits I have, they can't exactly offer like they don't offer any holiday pay, but like my income has increased to a point to where I could theoretically save up enough money to be able to get like a ticket
Some of
and
our
be able to do
races.
that things and enable this part of my life and
Mhm.
fandom. And that's I think that's what I'm really excited about. And now like to me the idea of getting like a 3-day paddock pass for the Portland Grand Prix every year, that's nothing. Like that's so worth it too, by the way. Absolutely love it.
Oh, I
um
listened to your podcast talking about it. I, as long time fan, long time listener, second time, whatever, second time temporary co-host.
Hoster, yeah.
Yeah. No, I talk more about it. Tell everyone. Everyone needs to know. Do it again in case they
I
missed
didn't. Yeah, well, I didn't get a chance to talk about it all that much,
Okay.
because Idris were a little on a crunch. But yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, so like I talked to Elizabeth Blackstock about it, and she told me she's like, I'm really excited for you because she's like, once you go and do a paddock thing, it's a completely different experience, and you understand this too because you and Shanali with knockoff McLaren were able to get yourself into like not only the paddock but the pit, which is way like really impressive to me. There is a very, very big difference, I will say. I mean, I can't, I mean, I wasn't in the F1 paddock, but I know just tangentially, like just from what I can see, I do know that the Indy paddock is quite a bit different in one very specific aspect, and that is just that not only are you seeing the drivers and the teams kind of like interacting with their like hospitality suites and whatnot,
Mhm.
but you are literally seeing like the first thing I saw when we walked in through the paddock was the cars being unloaded from the trucks and like brought down and pushed into like the mechanics area. And I think the thing that really struck me the most is you see these cars get unloaded from the trucks,
Mhm.
pushed into the mechanics area. You see all the mechanics working on them. They're starting the engines up. They're getting things prepped. You're just watching the tires being mounted onto the rims and then getting stacked. And they just stack them in the middle of the thing. And you can just walk up to and just like touch the tires.
Yeah.
It's wild. Um, you're also watching them all line up to go to tech inspection. You watch
Oh,
them all line up to get the fuel. And so you're witnessing all of these engineers literally like just huddled around the cars, pushing them, taking care of them, getting them prepared. And so when you see somebody hit a wall at the first turn, you are
it's
witnessing these engineers like prepare this car for 3 days up until this point, and then just to see it completely get you suddenly really understand. And there was a
mm,
moment in the Japanese Grand Prix too when Logan Sargent hit the wall, and there's
yeah.
that engineer was like grabbing his hair and he was just like shaking his head, and I'm like, dude, I get it. I
Right.
understand. It's like when you're watching the television, you don't really get a sense of it. But when you're
Yeah.
right there and you're seeing these guys just completely unedited, just like chatting with each other, like you can tell like they all know each other too because they're like they go to race.
Travel. Yeah.
And it was that was I think the most eye-opening experience for me. I thought that was so impressive. It was so cool to just see. I saw Marcus Ericsson just like hanging out with the Husky chocolate thing, just chatting with
Oh,
the engineers, and I was like, oh, it's Marcus, like
I talked to
Um,
him. He's so nice.
oh yeah, no, he does seem like a really he does seem like a really nice guy. I'm glad that he's driving for Andretti next year. Um, I did see the funny moments. I did see Chip Ganassi like walk straight in front of me, and I kind of like clocked that it was him, and I was like, that was Chip Ganassi. Like, that's another crazy thing. Just seeing all the drivers just meander around.
Just walking around, it's nuts. It's
Nobody dropped
crazy.
their chapstick though. That was disappointing. I didn't see any like kerfluffles or any
Being a
faux
Lance
pas.
Stroll level nuclear fool.
Yeah, yeah.
There,
I mean, there are plenty of people making themselves look like fools, though. Like walking around the paddock, like trying to make jokes and stuff to like engineers and whatnot. Like, hey, can I hop in there? It's just like, okay, guys, like, yeah, the dads that are out there doing it. But yeah, it was a very very eye-opening experience. I 100% it's 100% worth it too for the price. I mean, it was only 150 or 160 bucks for the 3-day pass and the paddock. The only thing
wow.
that was disappointing was I didn't get like a little lanyard and like a little badge. Like that was the sad part. Like I only just got a wristband. It was like I was going to a music concert, but
Yeah, for $150, it's $160. You can get a. They can make you a lanyard.
they should be able to make me. I'll make my own damn lanyard.
Yeah, right.
Um but yeah, that was really I need to get Idris up here. I think I'm gonna try and see if I can get him up here next year to go to that. And I'm also like I'm trying to make a thing where I go to Mid Ohio and the Portland race like every year if I can. Because they're just easy enough for me to do as far as like having a place to crash and stuff like that. But I know eventually I want to experience a couple more. Like, I really want to try going to Indy
Mm.
because I hear that's an amazing experience. So yeah, it was definitely amazing and a complete game changer. So I'm definitely going to be doing that again.
So
Um,
anyone who can reasonably afford it, highly recommend.
Yes. Well, that's the
That's
thing. Yeah. If you
yeah.
can reasonably afford it, and honestly, like if you think about it, like throughout one year, if you just pick one race that you want to go to, especially if it's local, especially if you live in the town where it happens, like, it's only like 160 bucks. Like just, it's, I think way more accessible than, I mean, if you don't want to do that, like you can still go to the race. The ticket for one day is, I think only like I think it's like 35 bucks a day or something like that for just a single day ticket.
Sure. I was gonna say your experience sounds much more interesting in the scheme of things than the one that Shanali and I got to have. We sure got ourselves a free pass into the paddocks, which is again bucket list life changing experience.
Hmm.
We'll never live down the joy and thrill of that day. We only got our little invite after the race was over.
Right.
So we didn't see any of the pre-preparation. We didn't see what goes on through the whole weekend. We got to see the post-race experience. And at the same time, that's when most people's jobs are kind of wrapping.
Hmm.
So I didn't get to see what it looks like for the teams to spend days and days preparing. I would be so curious what goes into the kind of pre-drive checklist and all the setup tuning and
Oh
testing that
yeah.
they yeah, it sounds incredible.
You would have had a field day. Because they're literally just wide open. Like you can walk right up to the little rope and you're like maybe 7 or 8 feet away from the car while they're sitting there working on it. They got their laptops out and they're doing all their like systems checks and everything. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think that the problem is like Formula One, when you have a pit pass, you're not like you can't
Okay.
be like in the pit or in the pit area. You know what I
Can't be
mean?
in the
Because it's
garage. You can't be
yeah,
in the
you can't
garage.
be in the garage. Yeah. So it's like you can maybe wander around like in between sessions or like, before like the stuff, but then they have to like clear you out.
Sure, it's
Um
highly choreographed. Like where you
yes.
can be. Yeah.
Yeah. So Indy's a lot more closer net and kind of very much more intimate, I guess you could say in
Yeah.
that way.
You feel like
Which
more attached or more like on the inside
mhm.
with
Yeah.
me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I had a moment. It was crazy too because the mechanics and the engineers are so chill and so laid back. I was standing like waiting for like the cars were passing. I think they were going to this is before the race. They had like a track walk, and so people were lined up for the track walk. They're also getting the cars out into like the pit lane and like out into the track.
Mhm.
And there was a moment where I'm standing there and I'm just like kind of waiting and I'm not, really paying much attention. And one of the mechanics is like literally backing up one of the Leonardman Lingham cars.
Yeah.
And he's like, excuse me, bud. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I just like backed up. He wasn't like, get out of the way. He wasn't like shouting or like getting really intense. He was just like, hey man, okay, yep, behind you. And that laid back nature makes you feel a lot more welcome, because I think that's the thing. It's like, as long as you're not like interrupting them like really
Doing their
intensely, yeah, they're just more. They feel more relaxed, and they're more or less just hey,
and you
like
feel more like part of it, right? Like you feel like you're
yes.
allowed to be there. The feeling Shanali and I had the whole time we were in the F1 paddocks was like, we do not belong here. Like we so clearly were not supposed to be there, and I think that was in some way part of the thrill was that like we really weren't supposed to be there. Um, but it is quite disconcerting to be like any single person could realize that I don't belong here and yell at me and kick me out, and I don't know what the consequences could be of having wiggled my way back here.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, it was like as stressful as it was exciting.
yeah.
Um, so it sounds like the IndyCar experience, 10 out of 10.
Oh, 10 out of 10. Yes, 100% would do again, will do again.
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely try and see if I can talk to more drivers and owners, though, because that was the thing that was a little starstruck. I'm just like, what do I
Oh my
do?
God.
That's Michael Andretti. What do I
Right.
do?
What do I
I did
Yeah.
shake Roman Grosjean's hand, though. He did. I saw Grosjean, and I was like, "Hey, like, good luck." And I shook his hand. He's like, "Oh, thanks," and very soft hands,
Ooh.
which makes sense because they were burned, and he's also a driver, so I'm sure he moisturizes a lot. Yeah,
Those
yeah.
tender cookies. That's amazing. Yeah. I love meeting drivers. So if we're gonna loop it back to F1,
Mm,
part of me and Chaneli's big highlight, one of the many highlights that we had in Austin last year was we were eating dinner in a hotel restaurant, which was where we met Marcus Ericsson. He
right.
walked in and I saw him and was like,
Mhm.
um, and then another person walked in wearing an Alpha team kit, like little polo. And I was like, oh my God, it's Callum Illitt. And I was wrong. It was Theo Porchard, the French F2 driver.
Mhm.
Super sweet. But there was a lot of talk about him taking Zhou Guanyu's seat this upcoming year.
Mm.
And
Mm.
Shanali and I were texting and texting. We had such mixed feelings because we like hung out with Theo for a little while and we're like kind of buddy. Like
Yeah.
that's the closest I feel to like having a buddy that could be an F1 driver, having
Mm.
like, spent a half hour talking to him.
Yeah.
Um, he would remember who we are. Like I believe that he would remember who we are. That feels like a big milestone.
Yeah.
Yuki, who we cornered outside the bathrooms, would not remember us. Um, and at the same time, I really like Joe. I don't think he's had the chance in that car to really show what he's made of. And
Yeah.
we were both texting like, it would be a travesty to lose Joe at this stage, but also we could have an F1 driver pal. Like
Hmm.
it was such a tug. It was such a tug of war back and forth. But I'm happy with the way things shook out. I think Teo will have his time.
Yeah. Well, well, it's interesting. I definitely want to talk about sort of the drivers lineups for next year.
A
But
lot locked in
it,
recently.
yeah, a couple. Yeah, there's a few that got locked in, including the McLaren boys.
Boys.
Which I definitely want to touch base on you with McLaren, because I did see that you and Schnally are making some new McLaren jumpers, right?
Prepared some props for when we get to that point in our conversation.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I want to circle back into the race, and I
But
do
we're here.
want to talk about qualifying specifically. Um, so qualifying, I think at the start, I think everybody, after the 3 practice sessions and Max was just on top the whole time, I'm pretty sure everybody knew that at this point, like, he was sort of back on form, if you will, after Singapore. Which I mean, unsurprising, sure. It's definitely a track that fits their space. It's a Honda track. They're still running Honda engines, so of course they're going to do really well in that because they have that sort of, I guess, development advantage, you could say. But really, honestly, the surprise was the McLarens. I know that everybody was talking about their upgrade package, and I remember when they first came out with it, everyone's like, well, I'm not sure if it's going to be good enough. Like, who knows if it's actually going to do anything.
The
But
McLarens weren't even on pace in the free practice sessions the same way. It was looking like a strong Ferrari weekend.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know where they pulled those laps from. This is Oscar's first time at Suzuka.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He doesn't race here. So, like, the fact that he pulled out a lap that out-qualified Lando is a testament to his talent. But I also saw an interview quite a while ago that he did with, quite a while ago. Before this weekend. Couldn't tell you how long ago they did this interview. But with the boys from P1, Matt and Tommy, formerly WTF1, where they had Oscar designing his dream F1 circuit, and I think he pulled the first sector from Suzuka, and this must have just been from sim racing.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I was actually going to say a similar thing. That there's been quite a few times where the commentators have been like, "Oh, these drivers have never driven on this track," and my first thought was, "Nah, they were born in like 2001. They've 100% driven this track as elsewhere. They've done sims, yeah." They've done sims, they've done it on iRacing, you know, and you know, obviously, yes, it's not the same as actually physically driving there, but like you can know the layout of the track. You know what I mean?
It sounds to me, I mean, what I'm getting, Oscar is like one of the first, not the first, but I think he's like a very pronounced example of how far the sims have come and how far sim racing can get you, right? He's like competitive against the sim racers in a way that not all of the F1 drivers are.
Right.
Max also famously, you know.
Yeah, he just does NASCAR trucks at Talladega apparently on loop repeat. So like
so silly.
It seems so wild, but hey, you know what? Get buck wild with it, Max. I'm okay.
Whatever works for you, whatever blows off steam. Max, I think he needs to blow off steam whenever he gets the chance. I'm so worried about him. Not a particularly big fan, but still worried, like human to human, about him. Off kick. Yeah. But anyway, so proud of Oscar, so proud of Lando. The fact, I think the last 2 weekends have given us really definitive data. The fact that Oscar drove from 17th to 7th.
Yeah.
In Japan. Nope, sorry, in Singapore. In Singapore. Spectacular. Like, they are both holding down the fort. They're not making mistakes. The car clearly has the pace, but they're also driving on form. I think McLaren has a really strong future.
Oh, yeah. Well, and just imagine where they were at the beginning. I told Idris, I'm like, we need to go back and listen to that first episode with our predictions and just, like, roast ourselves because I remember we were saying, like, McLaren's not going to do anything.
17th and 20th first race?
Yeah. Yeah, like, they were nowhere. But, you know, I think they slightly improved the look of their car, and I think they kind of got into their stride.
I say, Gabe, do you think this is all the Dark Trace livery?
I think I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
Okay.
And I do think that like a livery can sort of, if anything, it can bring some morale sometimes, and just a fresh, it doesn't work every time.
It's a little placebo. But the placebo effect is measurable.
Yes, it's true. Yes. And so I think that like those things kind of coincide. I mean, like look at Monaco. The McLarens looked awesome during Monaco, and they actually did really well. So I'm just like, hey guys,
Well, okay, and let's talk about if we're going to talk about liveries and the impact they have. Can we talk about Williams and their attempt at a Gulf livery? How do you feel about it?
I remember they had put out their they put out the it was like a it was a thing like a what is it a voter like a online vote thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And there was one in particular that I was like, that's the cool one, and that's what they should go with, and I knew they weren't going to go with it because because I feel like if you leave it up to the fans, I've learned this even through our own podcast. And we were originally coming up with the name of our podcast. We were like, hey, like here's a bunch of names, what should we choose? And we put in a few filler options that we didn't think anyone was going to pick.
Yeah.
And guess what everyone picked? They picked all the filler ones. The one that the filler option we actually have it in my intro. It's the audio pit stop. That was what everybody wanted.
It's a good tagline.
It is a good tagline. It's not a good title. And my cousin Nick thankfully pointed out, he's like, yeah, audio pit stop is the name of a record shop on Route 66. And I'm like, okay.
That's excellent.
I'm like,
I will say I was taking extensive notes that I will not be referencing last night as I was watching the race. I was telling my friends about how I'm going to be on this podcast. And when I told them the name, they were delighted. They're like, wow, that's a great name. F1 or F1.
Yeah. I thank my brother for that. He came up with a whole bunch of good ones, and that one was I think the one that struck the best. I think the only problem that we had was that at first everyone was like, "Oh man, it sounds too aggressive, and it sounds too mean spirited." We're like, "No, it's supposed to be like it's a play on words, And so I think that's kind of what we did with like a rebrand, like when we redid our graphic. I wanted to make it feel a little more fun and a little more like, inviting, like a little less intense sort of feeling. Like I wanted to give off the vibe like, hey, we're here to have fun. We're not being serious, because we could have done like a really serious, like, graphic.
Sure.
And that's one thing we did notice when we saw a lot of the other podcasts was like some of them just had really serious names and really serious graphics. And we're like, we just want to have fun with it.
This is gatekeeping. Yeah, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, we don't need to do that.
I can't imagine that anyone would listen to your podcast, you and Idris, and come to the conclusion that it's like too serious or too harsh. I think you guys are super welcoming, super generous. I think that
you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, you've heard it here first. If you did your brand, this is me writing my 5-star review live for you, and I'll do it also on the on Google Podcast or whatever. But Apple Podcast, all of them. But I do think like whatever your branding that you're like, I think your brand identity is strong and consistent, and is also like kind and playful and friendly and accessible, and you're two people showing up as people talking about people in a sport that is a human sport. Like, I don't know, I feel like you've nailed it. So
well, I'm so glad to get this feedback. I really appreciate this live, because like Idris and I are two people we do a lot of self-doubt and a lot of critiquing. And so it's always good when we have those sort of positive, like, kind of affirmations. It's also really hard out there because like it's hard to get a lot of engagement from people online. And that's usually like a metric to know whether or not that you like actually are doing the right thing. Like we'll get a bunch of like listens on a podcast, so like we won't get a lot of interaction. It's just like, well, like, what's the reasons for that? But I also think that like the internet and social media is sort of, the algorithms kind of fight against you a little bit, and it makes it difficult.
Here's the other thing I'll say: whoever's listening to this podcast, DM the pod. They are the nicest people in all the land. And I understand, Gabe. I wonder, because I met you in person.
Mm-hmm.
We're friends from real life before
right.
the pod, but I also know you guys to just be giant fans who love this and are doing this in part because you want to talk about it. And so if anyone out there is listening, I know you said it on the last episode, but if anyone out there is listening and wants to be a friend of the pod, this is your chance. You got to do it before they blow up. Slide in this DM. Say hi. You'll have a new F1 friend. It's a dream.
Yeah. See, we do have one of the crazy things that did happen early on in the podcast is that Will Power, the Indy driver, he actually followed us on our podcast, and we don't know if he listens. We don't think he does. I have yet to like actually ask him. Like I've met him or I've like did like the signing thing a couple of times, but like I'm waiting for the opportunity to get a moment with him, like maybe in the paddock, and be like, hey, so do you know about a podcast called F1 or F Off? Like, and just see if he does, because it was very strange, and Idris and I were just like, well, but we're trying to exploit that. We did send him a message before the Indy Grand Prix in Mid Ohio, like, hey, Will, like we're gonna be here, like and we just didn't get a response. So we tried to pull a Tiernan and Shinali, but it didn't work. So
to a driver, they're so busy.
I know. Well, also we didn't know whether or not he actually runs his own social media, because some guys don't.
Yeah. Good point. But anyway, I love that. I love that for you. No, you guys are like, I'll say days away from that. So I guess I don't know what the metrics are, but that's the feeling I get.
Right. Well, I mean, and honestly, I think Idris and I, we want to try and do more diversifying, like getting more people on the pod, and that's why I always tell you and Shinali both, like, if you ever have like a free weekend and you want to like be on an episode, like you always have an open invitation with us. Like we will, because we just sit down and we just do our, we'll just do our Zoom call. So like, if you're just like, hey, I don't have anything going on Sunday, so when you guys record, just let us know. We'll just send you a message and we'll just do it, because the more the merrier for us. I mean, we love talking to both of you. We love it, so anytime. That's why.
Great. We are 1 hour into recording and have not started talking about qualifying.
Yeah, right. Well, we touched on it a little bit. And hopefully
let's go back. I'll loop us back.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, I hope the recording doesn't stop, but if it does, we're just gonna reset it, because we're definitely doing more. Well, yeah. So, Tiernan, give me your thoughts on what's going on with Aston Martin. Because I mean, honestly, I'm here. I'm like through the whole race. Aston, I swear, Alonso is carrying that team on the back of his shoulders. He really is. Like,
Alonso, small in stature, big in impact. He's a short guy. He's a short guy. No,
he's shorter than people think.
He's way shorter than people think. I think that's the trick. I have a friend who like met him once and was like, Tiernan, you don't understand. He's so small.
But he feels so tall and big, but he's just not.
He's got big guy energy. Yeah, no, like big guy energy. But anyway, he is carrying the team. Here's the other thing I'm struggling with in general with Aston is, like, they came out the gate at the beginning. We're talking about the transformations through the season. They came out strong, right? He was fighting for second row starts, first row starts at the beginning of the season. They're not in good form anymore. I don't know if everyone else has developed around them, and they haven't. I don't know if they spent all their money replacing Lance's cars, and so they can't do an upgrade package. I don't know what it is. Alonso is carrying the team. Stroll is barely holding it together.
I'm sure Stroll is used to his dad just replacing his cars all the time. So
for sure. He doesn't seem to carry the anxiety that the rest of them do around putting the car in the wall. But
nope. No, I saw his. Did you see his faces after he retired in the race in the back? They had the camera on him. He was just going,
oh.
Like, it just looked like a 6-year-old being like, I don't know where that cookie went from the jar. It was just like, he didn't look dejected. He just looked like, I don't know what happened. It's just like, oh my gosh. There's a lot of little nuances about my dislike for Stroll, and they take in very interesting forms.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. No, he's not doing great. Lawrence needs to fire him. He's not going. I know I came on this pod and I was like, he's going to do it. I still think it'll happen, but it's taking way too long. It's going to be like I lost a lot of respect for Gunther based on how long he kept Grosjean. It's going to be that with Lawrence. I think if he is unwilling to cut Lance at the end of this season, I'm sure he could put him back at Williams. There's still a Williams seat open. Put him back at Williams. Get Liam Lawson in there. Win a lot of fan support. That's my pitch to Lawrence Stroll if you're listening.
Yeah, I just there's so many drivers that could fill that Aston seat so well.
So well.
And I mean, and here's the thing, seriously, like we talk about F1 being you have the teams and they have the cars and how the cars should be equal machinery, right? There's always that debate. I'm not 100% convinced that it's always equal. I mean, maybe you know, maybe you have a little more insight about like that's from an engineering perspective, but like I do know that like setups are different. You know,
Very,
people's bodies are physically different. And so
very.
like those setups can affect things, and like and not even just with like how stuff is internally, like maybe there are like I mean, would there be a case for like literally physical components on the car having to be there in order to accommodate a driver's driving style?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think in general, the like components that are most influential on an F1 car's performance are like the powertrain and the aerodynamics, right?
Mm.
Those are things that I do tend to believe stay consistent car to car. I do think the mapping of, for example, the shifting
Mm-hmm.
maybe or brake bias preferences, like those sorts of things may vary car to car between two teams and like the driving styles and the preferences. Um, and they do tune the aerodynamic setups within a range, you know, per
Mm-hmm.
driver. Suspension setup, like I do think they do quite a bit of tuning. They also do push upgrades packages to one car and not the other, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a thing that happens. So it's clearly rules legal to
Mm-hmm.
put different components from one car to the next. Um, I do know like the driver cells are quite different car to car. I have a friend who works at Delara
Mm-hmm.
and as an engineer, and he worked on mix driver cell, but not on Mazepins. So
Mm-hmm.
like there's some amount of like engineering infrastructure that can be different
Mm-hmm.
vehicle to vehicle. So like yeah, I think the cars can be, if you look at the creep of all of those factors coming together, you can wind up with dramatically different cars.
Right.
I think that's part of what happened with Mercedes last weekend is
Yeah.
they, you know,
Yeah.
they
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and think about this too. You know that like Daddy Stroll is not going to give his son a bad car deliberately.
correct.
You know.
That's where this doesn't make a lot of sense unless he's half stepping towards it or the team, right, is without Lawrence's consent half stepping towards it, right? If I were working under Lawrence Stroll and I had Alonso and Lance, I would divert any resources I could towards Alonso,
Hmm. Yeah, I
right?
mean, he's the one that's producing your results, but at the same time, it's like you want the team to both be well, and that's where I think this is where I think it gets really complicated because it's like clearly Aston Martin does not they don't want to they're not at the top. Right, they can't afford to favor one driver over another. It's like
Right.
clearly,
Because
like they can favor Max, like
right.
Red Bull can favor Max because he's the one that's basically getting them all their constructors points. Same with Alonso. Alonso right now, he's the only reason why they're even in contention for like fourth or third or fourth, you know, constructors championships right now. And but the thing is, it's like he can only carry so much. And you listen to him during the race, he's like, "You threw me to the weeds, like throw me to the lions. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, you tell me how to do this." And he was still like on tires that were not working on that Aston, still fighting to get those positions, still fighting to stay in the fight. That is why I still to this day, that's still why Alonso is my favorite driver because the guy just gets in there, he does the job, and he might complain, but he'll still just do it. You know,
Yeah.
like same as Singapore, he could have just retired the car, but no, he was fighting last. He just like was just like trying to see what he can do, just getting the data like
Yeah.
for the team.
Right. Right.
And yeah,
He is the chief strategist. He is thinking of not just about his own race, but about everything else that's happening on track.
mm-hmm,
He is, um, I bet he's one of the most pleasant drivers to work with in term like as a I'm gonna make a gamble that like
mm,
as an engineer he is one of the most useful drivers to work with in terms of the
mm-hmm.
feedback that he's able to give. He's so experienced, he's so articulate,
Oh
he
yeah,
understands the nuances of what makes a car drivable or undrivable. Like I'm certain that as much as he's on the radio, like this is a dream, this is a nightmare, you know.
mm-hmm,
There have been some jokes about that. I do bet that he's able to give like really tactical, actionable feedback because he has come up through F1 and is so experienced
Mm-hmm.
that like
Right.
he must be great. He's delightful.
Well,
The
and then
team
here,
trusts him, you know.
eh, well, and then I don't mean to heap harping on Stroll, but Stroll is not a rookie who drives like a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Well
it's just
said.
like Stroll should have lots of experience. He's been in effectively kind of almost two like three different race teams. I mean, like he raced for Williams, then his dad bought Force India, which turned into Racing Point, and he was with Racing Point, and then they turned into Aston Martin. Stroll has a lot of race experience. He's got a lot of years. He's got quite a few years under his belt, and yet still, like, he makes mistakes that like you don't expect a seasoned driver to make. And that's where I start to get into that territory of like not liking drivers as much as other drivers, because it's like a difference between like if you really cannot bring up the results that you need to bring up even after all the experience that you have, and like you're doing things like impeding like in every other race, or like like there's been several times where he's done like he's either punted somebody off track unnecessarily, like dove into the inside and took a risk like where he didn't need to. He just feels like he's kind of disjointed. He's kind of sloppy. I've never seen Lance Stroll do anything that felt really impressive or very magical in any way. I've seen it from
He's good in the
Albon.
rain. He's good in the rain. That's all he's got going for him.
Yeah, but like, so is Alonso. So is Hamilton. Like,
Oh,
like it's like,
the grid. Like it used to be a really. I think that's perhaps a mental crutch I'm still leaning on that I think a lot of people in F1 lean on is like, well, they're good in the rain. Like that used to be a skill that many racing drivers did not have.
right.
At this point, this is the absolute pinnacle of motorsport. Everyone on that grid is good in the rain.
Right. Right. I mean, it's adds such a more insane element to the driving that it's like you have to. I mean, like the thing is weird. It's like simulators can only do so much because rain's very unpredictable. Like it's composition, the oil on the track. Like there's a lot of different elements. It's really hard to sort of simulate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just like you at this point, like if you can't run in the rain
You shouldn't
relatively effectively, then it's just like what are you doing here? So,
anymore. I think
um,
a fair comparison for like driver maturity is because Lance has been in the sport a lot longer than his peers his age, right?
right.
Um, but I look at Carlos. Carlos joined Formula One in 2015. Lance joined in 2017. Carlos was also like a little boy when he started in a lot of ways. He was a little kid.
Mhm.
Um, but if you look at the trajectory that Carlos has taken and the level of maturity that he drives with and the level of judgment that he drives with, you talked about it last weekend. We saw it in Singapore. Like, Carlos is out there making really educated decisions based on tenure in Formula One.
Mhm.
Lance is, you're right, still like blundering around like
Yeah.
a little bit out there.
Look at Lando. Lando's been in the sport
Yeah.
like way shorter than Stroll has, and look how well Lando is doing. You know what I mean? And like, there's just to me, it's just there's really not any. It's hard to make excuses for Lance Stroll. It's really hard. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
But
Like,
Oscar, it's Oscar's first season and he's not
yeah, yeah,
performing. He's
yeah.
performing better.
I mean, I think that like I think the drivers should be given enough opportunity to prove themselves. And at this point, Lance, you got a good car. I mean, we know Aston Martin can be on the podium. It's happened multiple times by your teammate. So
Not
like
sure
he can't blame the
anymore.
car. He can't blame
Yeah.
his experience. He can't blame the team because his dad owns it. Like
Mhm.
the list of things that he can blame it on, like he had the only person he can blame is himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing is I don't think Lance does that, and I think that's the problem. I think is that
I will
Lance,
say, yeah.
I don't know
His,
if he can't look inside or himself, or maybe he does. It just doesn't work. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he keeps dropping his chapstick everywhere,
I've
and
heard I've heard hearsay at this point. I heard on a podcast, clip on Instagram, you know, like level of hearsay. But
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the talk of the rumor mill is that like Lance's heart just has never all the way been in it. You know, like even when he was a new
Oh.
driver. And
Oh.
someone posited the theory. Now I'm just like really spreading rumors. Someone posited the theory that like perhaps Lawrence cares more about this than Lance does.
Hmm.
And I had never considered it through that perspective. I had always looked at it through the lens of like, Lance must want this, and his dad has the resources to try to make his kids' dreams come true. But it's
Hmm.
beginning to seem. I've been a Lance Stroll apologist for a lot of my life, and this
Hmm.
season has made it impossible for me to continue to hold that line.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never really thought of that. And it's funny because we see a lot of that nepotism, like in the sport now. I mean, well, not nepotism as much as like father son sort of dynamics. I mean, you see it with Max. Like the only difference is between those two is that Max is winning. Um,
Yes.
and part of me wonders if Max might be in a like if Max really cared about F1, he would be doing F1 all the time, every time. But like I almost feel like him doing NASCAR trucks at Talladega on Sims all the time, maybe that's his little way of signaling like I'm not as into this as you might think I am. And
Max
like
has
my
also in interviews spoken about like I do wonder I do believe Max would be a racer no
yeah,
matter what. Like regardless of his dad,
yeah.
I don't know if he'd be an F1 racer regardless
Yeah,
of his dad.
I feel like there's probably a certain percentage of it which is Yoss being like, you need to succeed where I failed.
And I know this world, so I can get you into it and navigate it, and we have the contacts and we have the money. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I think you're right. And I do wonder where Max will settle.
right.
Right? He's not gonna retire and build B hotels like Seb. He's
Well,
gonna he's gonna
yeah.
retire to another series, and I am curious to see what it is.
I think that I think these drivers should be freed to do, you know, what it is that is really going to make them comfortable.
Mhm.
And then you think of somebody like Mick, who Mick is clearly dedicated to Formula One in this way. It's like,
Mhm.
he took a lot of punishment and abuse at Haas, and then Mercedes picked him up, and he's like doing all the test sessions, and he's there at all the races, and he's just doing everything he can to try and get himself, wedge himself back in.
Do you think he has a shot at the second Williams seat? It can't be Logan again, right? Like, does has Williams realized that they made a misstep hiring a Florida man thinking they would get American fans? Do they realize?
Yeah, they announced Logan Sargent at Coda when we were there. I remember
Yeah, I
that.
know. I
And
remember that.
I remember everybody being like, "Oh, it's the first American." I'm like, "Who is this guy?" Like, I never heard of
Right.
him.
I
Um,
follow the junior series, and I was like, he who?
yeah,
Where'd you get him?
yeah. So if it were up to me, he would 100% get that Williams seat next to Albon.
Yeah. When you say he,
Because
who do you mean?
I mean Mick
You mean
Schumacher.
Mick?
Yeah,
I could also see Liam Lawson having made his case.
yeah. So it's funny. Like Liam Lawson is doing really, really well in this AlphaTauri, just covering for Danny. I've been thinking a lot about whether or not, like, what Danny would be doing if he hadn't had that injury. Like, would he be up there with Yuki? Like, does the AlphaTauri fit Liam really well, and that's why he's doing so well? Like, there's all these different factors that could come into play here.
So hard to know. That's what makes F1 so fun. That's like what makes it
Mhm.
possible to have this podcast is like all of the hypothetical, we just can't know.
Well, what was funny watching Singapore? I told my brother, I watched it with my brother and my friend Terry, and the whole time they're just like, so like we're getting towards the end, right? And there's this really close, tight battle, between Lewis and George and Carlos, and they're just like, so what's gonna happen? Like, they're just following each other, and I'm just like, well, they're like, what could happen? I'm like, well, any number of things, like George could run into Carlos, like Hamilton could hit George, like or Norris could spin out, like Carlos could have an engine failure, like Any number of
George could
things could
snap the
happen.
wall and go into
And
the
then,
barrier.
yeah, and then literally what happened, like Norris clipped the wall, George clipped the wall, but worse, and just flew straight into the, into the barrier, and there, voila, there it was, last lap. And they were like, oh my God, like, you're right. Like this is, it could be anything. And you're right. That's really why, Formula One kind of caught me, and why it keeps continuing to catch me, because the unknown is so unpredictable. And I think that's what people are a little upset about with the season, is that Max wins so much that it's like, it's become this predictability. But I've always said, you never know. I mean, like, Max could have a mechanical failure. It can happen. They've been so reliable.
Yeah.
Like, there could be some component that they think is reliable, and if they're still holding up, that's just secretly, slowly starting to deteriorate.
Also, anything can happen in terms of the just like general chaos. Lando, Max, and Oscar went 3-1 in the first corner.
Yeah, that was impressive. How about that? Do you think they planned that ahead of time?
Yes, I do. I do think they planned it ahead of time. I think that was purely strategic. And Max did an amazing job to cover them off. He does have the faster car, but still, like, the reaction times from Lando and Oscar, spectacular. The track placement, spectacular. I love seeing them together.
They were Norris was faster in the reaction time at the start. And that's why I think he was able to kind of inch ahead. But yeah, like you said, Max's car is just so much faster.
So much faster. And he can, like, you see their experience. You could watch the spread of experience into the first corner with where they lifted and braked. Like,
yeah.
Oscar lifted so early compared to Max and Lando. It was really wild to watch, like, the confidence that the two carried in their cars, where Oscar is still kind of... and that's what shows his rookiness, right? He shows his rookiness lifting a little too early into the first corner and putting his car on the podium.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and losing out one spot to his teammate. Like, it's not that he's dumping the car into the wall. It's not that he's dipping a toe into the grass. It's not that he's taking the run. Like, he's just rock solid.
Yeah. These are skills that you develop over years of racing, which is why, like, you see Fernando do it all the time. Like, Fernando, it's incredible to see him make saves when he almost loses it, and it's like, how did he recover? It's like, he knows how to recover. Like, he knows what he's feeling.
He doesn't even have to think. His body just recovers
it. Just recovers it. Yeah, Hamilton does the same thing. He got, like, smacked by Perez off into, like, in that at the start. And I was like, but he was right there, was able to react to it. And it's so impressive to see that. Well, also, I want to talk about, while we're on the subject of experience, though, I want to kind of circle back to Williams and this whole thing with Sargent and possibly Mick, because what is this, like? I think it was like the third time in the last 4 races that Logan has had an accident, or like has crashed out or something like that. And the monetary, amount of money that's racking up is a lot.
Correct.
And if you're a Williams, like, you have to think, like, there's a certain point, right, where it's like, okay, we want to give this guy a chance. But, like, you've been given how many chances this year, like, during these races?
And here's the other thing. I really think the only business case for, quote, giving someone a chance, like, at the end of the day, these teams are businesses. This sport is a business. It's gnarly to have to talk about it in those terms, but, like, depersonalize it for a second. The only cost of not giving someone a due diligence chance, there's the potential, right, that they grow up and that they have a learning window, and then they are high performers. So you may lose a high performer by cutting them too early. But the real business cost, I think, is purely in goodwill and reputation, right? Like, Red Bull has a bad reputation for cutting their drivers too quickly, losing people mid-season. They ran through Pierre and Alex, and, it took them so long to find Max's teammate in Checo. And as soon as Checo wavers, there's like, well, there he goes. So, like, Red Bull has a bad reputation for that.
Yeah, well, a lot of that's Marco. or on
cast it.
yeah,
Marco. Yeah, well,
Helmut Marko.
he's a bad man. And that's the thing. Like, I have this idea of like, he's a bad man. Williams, I think, lose it. Nobody likes. This is so mean, but like, I don't know anyone that's a Logan Sargent fan. I have friends from Florida. I'll admit it in public. I have friends who have grown up or who have lived in Florida. Even they aren't attached to Logan Sargent. I think Williams misunderstood Americans' allegiance. Like, I know they signed him to get that American money in. I don't know
Uh-huh.
anyone who's buying Logan Sargent merch. I don't know anyone who's going to bat for him. Nobody
No.
bring any new fans into the sport. Like, there's, I think, only a benefit to them for cutting him and putting in somebody who has support behind him, like a Liam Lawson, like a Mick. These like little golden children
Hmm.
of F1.
Well, I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think that I've said it before. Idris and I have said that Danny Ricciardo feels more like an American than Logan Sargent does at this point. Do you think that Drive to Survive has any sort of sway on that? Because like
Mm,
you look at people like Alex Albon, like
yeah.
he had a whole narrative in Drive to Survive. Same with like Gasly, Ocon, Alonso, not really that much because he wasn't like super in there, but he was still kind of there.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I think that Liam Lawson, I think, is just showing what he's capable of because of just the driver that he is. But
Yeah.
like Danny Ricciardo, I don't think he would be back in the sport the way that he is had it not been for a heavy dose of Drive to Survive. And so I'm curious as to see if Logan, when the new seasons of Drive to Survive inevitably comes out, I'm curious to see whether or not he's in it much, or if they have a highlight episode on him, or if that will change perspectives. Because I wonder if that has some sway on it. You
Works
know.
on me. It does. No, that's interesting. It could be, right? Like maybe Williams knows something we don't know, but the promotions that Williams have done with him so far, I mean, he is out there working it with his little model photos. Like
Hmm.
he's got such a serious model face. I kind of love it. I honestly do love that
Hmm.
promotion. Like all the promotions they're doing with him, and they're really pitching him as like bland American model man. Um, but I don't. Yeah, I'm curious. We'll see. And if so, I hope so. Like, if there is something there that the Williams media team hasn't been able to show us about Logan
Mm.
yet, and there is something there and Drive to Survive is somehow able to capture it, like, I want to see it. I want to know. I am always happy to see these drivers, like, portrayed as human beings. I think we have a tendency, like, as fans,
Yeah.
we're so far removed. Like,
Yeah.
we forget. And I remember a story from that Max told somewhere, maybe on Twitch, like on a Twitch stream that like someone pulled a clip of. But he was telling a story about a time that his cat climbed into a closet of his and
Hmm.
then knocked furniture onto the door, trapping the door closed. And to get the cat out, Max's idea was to like thwack a hole through the wall and lift the cat out, and like the hole's still in the door. Like that closet abandoned, right? Like that is a humanizing story to me. I'm like,
Mm.
oh wow, he made a series of poor choices. He could have taken the hinges off the wall, but like in the moment your cat's in there, you do what you got to do and you don't address the problem. Like I'm here for any amount that I can see these people instead of as like media presented parasocial relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah, if even knowing that anything Drive to Survive could tell us about Logan would make him, it would still be a media presented parasocial
Well,
relationship.
yeah.
Anything that humanizes him, I'll take. I'd
Yeah.
love to see.
Yeah, it's true, but like it's like you said, but though at the end of the day, it's also a business and it's also a sport, and like it does. You could be the nicest person in the world, but if you can't drive a car worth shit, then you're not going to be on a team. And I think that is where I think that Williams need to make a smarter decision here, because I do think you're right. I do think that they went with Logan as a way to try and be like, oh well, like here's like an American, like we're gonna go with him because it's like the American sport, like getting kind
And
of,
like,
but that wasn't really the right angle, and honestly, because it's like as Americans, like we love Danny Ricciardo, we
love
love Norris, like we love
you.
we love
A lot
Yuki,
of
so it's like
It's like they've misjudged what pulls in American fans. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about was like, okay, simply for being an American, like how close would someone have to be to my like America's such a big country and I don't give a shit about Florida. Like
I know.
Florida, I don't give a shit. So like how close would someone have to be to me for me to care, right? I grew up
Mm,
in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to school in Evanston, north of Chicago. I lived in the city of Chicago for 5 years when I was out of school. Like I think if a kid from Chicago became a Formula One driver, that would be enough for me to have some amount of allegiance to them
mm,
because of our proximity.
mm,
But like a kid from Illinois, don't think I care. Don't think I care about Illinois. Like don't think I'm from California. Don't think I care. Colton Herta is from California. It's
mm.
not enough. I don't care about Colton. Like I don't think I think they misjudged Americans what leads us to an affinity. And you're right, it's the
It's the
personality.
person. You look at Pato O'Ward. Like Pato O'Ward is
So,
universally loved, but and he's a
so
great dude.
adored.
Yeah,
And
like
he's got the Mexican and American
yeah.
allegiance, like the North America in a package. Like he's so goddamn delightful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And like that's somebody it's like that thing where you say like niceness will get you far. It's like if you're a person that people like, they're going to want you to be in doing things. Like I think that and it's like that's Danny Ricciardo to a T, right?
yeah,
People love Danny Ricciardo. He just happens to be a very talented race car driver that's won
yeah,
races. And so
yeah.
it's just that perfect that's why it makes sense for him to be back in the paddock.
Right. Well,
It
and
was the
Williams
same with
Albon is a delightful
he
personality, like
is.
a charming guy. He like does a lot of philanthropy. He's got his American golfer girlfriend who's Lily is spectacular. Like he's got the bleached hair. Like
Mhm.
Alex is like another super likable person and personality with a really likable story, right? Like he's gone through some shit in a way that a lot of Formula One drivers have just come in wealthy.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
like they nailed it. If Williams was going for like two really likable, personable drivers, they nailed it with Alex and they
Mm.
missed it with Logan.
You know, I feel like it's funny because I feel like Haas, Alpine to an extent, and Alfa Romeo have kind of like been sort of a PR sort of dead zone in a way. Like just, you don't really hear much about Alpine and Alpha. Like Zhou Guanyu, a lot of times I forget that he's even on the grid, and that's really disappointing because it's like it has nothing to do with him as a person or as a driver. It's just that like nothing happens, you
Here's
know?
the thing about Joe. It means we're on slightly different parts of Instagram. Fashion icon. Every
Oh,
week.
okay.
The like F1 slash, and I'm not a big fashion person, but like the F1 fashion accounts are big. They've always been big Lewis fans. Joe
Uh-huh.
stepped in out the gate, and people were like, "Holy shit!" The things he's wearing, walking into the paddocks, like he's nailing it.
Okay.
That
I
is
do I
so that's all I'm getting is from the fashion accounts.
I was going to say I do know that his helmets are always on point. He always has some incredibly ornate
Yeah.
helmets and I love that. But yeah, I mean I just think like well and that's hopefully maybe like I said with Drive Survive we'll get a little more of a thing from that. But honestly, I do think kind of swinging it back, I definitely think Williams the smart decision for them would be to bring Mick Schumacher in with Yuki or not Yuki with Albon because I
A
just
Mick
think
and
like
Albon lineup would be so wholesome.
I think they would do well together. I think they would help each other out quite a bit because I just think Mick needs to be in an environment where people care about him and are trying to help him succeed. I think Haas is a little more. Haas was like cutthroat when they didn't need to be cutthroat. You know, it's
Right.
like
Because, like, Gunter, I think, swung too hard. I think he held on to Grosjean and Magnussen for too long because he
mhm,
loves them. I really do believe that Gunter loves Grosjean and that he loves Magnussen. And I think he
mhm,
held on to two drivers because he was attached to them for too long.
yeah,
I think he was forced or had to come to hard terms that he had kept them for too long when they
mhm,
were underperforming. He went way too hard in the other direction with like it's purely a business case. And he was so
yeah,
explicit in Drive to Survive. We need Mick because we need German sponsors. It's like, oh God.
yeah.
this baby
Mm.
boy has been through a lot, and he's a very talented driver. Like, that should be your narrative.
Hmm.
You can't go from you can't claim a business case when you kept Grosjean and Magnussen for so long.
Yeah, no, and I'm actually glad to hear that Haas is going to be taking over the Alfa Romeo sponsorship when Alfa Romeo switches to Audi, because that's honestly sounds like the most stable sponsorship that they've ever had in their entire career as a race team.
What about Chipotle?
Well, yeah, Chipotle was pretty fun. That was a nice ad. That felt a little more closer to home for me, so I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, Chipotle, let's do it.
Americans and
Yeah.
Americans. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
No,
I'm just so long as they don't pick up another Russian oligarch manure mogul or whatever, just lean into cryptocurrency or something or get sponsored by Elon Musk. Like it's like let's not do that. Let's stick to some.
I'm taking the other approach. Let's go way hard on grifts. I'm gonna take a hardline approach. I want 100% of their sponsors to be cryptocurrencies.
And AI generate chat GPT. Yeah, just lean the other
Last
direction.
episode, I'm doubling down. I want Haas to take that.
It's like, you know what? If you're gonna have all this money, you might as well dump it into something that's fun that people enjoy.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree. So one thing I did want to say too about this race, I thought was I think it was a result of the start. There was a very high attrition rate, and the one thing that did really surprise me, though, that I can't say I've ever seen this happen in a race, was when they put Perez out again after he brought the car in.
My God, 19 laps down or something absurd.
Yeah, and like the whole reason why they did that was so that he wouldn't get a grid penalty for the next race.
Mhm.
Which I didn't even know was a thing. I assumed that if you had like a 10-second penalty and you retired, they were just like, oh, well, okay.
It's a wash.
It's a wash. But no, apparently they can just impose a grid penalty for the next race if you don't serve that penalty. And I'm like, isn't he punished enough? Like, he didn't finish the race.
Man is going through it. They put 3 front wings on that car, something absurd.
Yeah.
Like they already are penalized, my guys. We don't
Yeah.
have to make him sit in the car. Did you see the shot of him sitting in the car where clearly the team is like back and forthing? They're like, Checo, you gotta sit in the car. We're maybe gonna put you out. The trauma in that man's eyes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, his team is like, the owner of the team is throwing racial slurs at him, and then like he's like just under the shadow of quite possibly the one of the most perfect championship wins in history.
Yep.
And that poor Checo, he is, like you said, I mean, he's being put through it. And I know it was like, okay, we need to like make sure you don't have a grid penalty. He was driving a bit scrappy. Like I did notice, like he took some lunges that were not going to pan out for him. So did Logan Sargent too. He flew in. Well, he locked up into the hairpin and just like pitched Bottas around. And so there was a lot of scrappiness happening, but I was really surprised. I did not expect them to. I was just like, what's the point of doing this? Until Bertie Collins was like, oh, so he doesn't get a grid penalty in the next race. And honestly, I don't understand that rule. I really don't. I think that if you retired from a race, it shouldn't matter if you served that penalty, because clearly it should be null and void. I mean,
right. I agree. I do love though that Red Bull, I don't know if any other team would have had the wherewithal to fight that feedback from the FAA, because I'm certain what happened was they were like, this car's wrecked. We can't keep putting wings on this. Like, we got to retire him. And they pull him in the garage. And then the FIA must have proactively gone to them and been like, hey, you guys, that penalty you didn't serve, you're going to have to deal with that next race. And that Christian was like, whoa, that's some bullshit. What if we put him back out? Like, I didn't know. I would assume it's against the rules to pull the car, work on it, and put it back out. obviously nobody's trying to take those sorts of risks. Nobody's trying to put that kind of wear on their already damaged cars. I kind of love that Red Bull was like, absolutely not.
Right.
Here's a loophole. We're going to exploit it.
Well,
I
you
love
know,
that they found that and exposed it.
yeah. Well, and you know what was interesting? It made me think of IndyCar because that happens a lot in IndyCar. If there's a car that goes off and gets like hit, has some damage, they'll bring it into the pits, they'll fix it and send it back out. And I didn't understand why that was until Elizabeth explained that it's because they get points for every place finish. And
Mm.
like if you finish ahead of a driver that maybe had retired or something like that, or like crashed, then you get more points. So there's incentive to do that. But in Formula One, there's no incentive because you only get points from 10 up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's super interesting. It had me thinking about like, I'll never get over the first time I watched a MotoGP race where it started to rain and they can't really change tires on those bikes.
mm,
And so they just hop on a bike with rain tires already installed. They just swap vehicles.
mhm.
Like there are a couple sports where they swap cars mid race. Early
Yeah.
Formula E was like that too. Like it had me thinking about those implications. Like why couldn't they? Are there regulations around like putting you in a new chassis? Like I think it opens up an interesting can of
Yeah.
worms.
Well, I think they used, I mean, they used to do that in F1 right when it was, the spending was really excessive. Like they'd have the instances where like there'd be a turn one crash and then they're like, "Oh, they're running into the spare car." But you know, the spare car was like set up for like their teammate and not them, and like it was like this
Oh,
whole thing. Um
interesting.
I think
I didn't know that.
F1, well, yeah, I think F1 has a rule about this because I think it's supposed to curb excessive spending, you know, because it's like if it was left up to the teams, they would bring like four cars to each race and then they would have like, this car we only use for qualifying and it's super lightweight and like really has a crazy engine, you know. So I think that was sort of the way to do it. And that's why it was very shocking to me because I'm just like, I had the same thought. I didn't think they were allowed to repair the car and then send it back out.
I know.
Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was fascinating to watch. That was definitely a first for me. But you know, I also thought too when they sent Perez out, I thought maybe he was gonna like. I thought maybe that was going to be some problem. Like, could you imagine if you're like driving, you know, you're driving an F1 driver, you're just going around and like Perez has not been in the race for 16 laps and then all of a sudden here he comes out of the pit lane. I
Yeah.
hope the engineers would have said something like, yeah, Perez is coming back out.
Right.
'Cause that could have been a shock, you know, if you
A
didn't real
shock.
know what was going to happen.
And like,
Um,
is he allowed to race people? Like, I
right.
understand that back markers are allowed. They, you know, they, until they're blue flagged, they're allowed to do whatever they want. Like, that feels irresponsible to let that car out. And I
Yeah,
understand they kept him out the minimum amount of time they could to like be out, serve the penalty, put him back in the garage. But like, the implications of that are so interesting. Yeah, like
yeah,
how
it's
could he have held up Lando? Could they have put
yeah.
him out to actively interfere with the McLarens? Like, I don't see why not.
Or like, what if for some reason they put him out to try and give like Max a tow or something, even though Max
Yeah,
doesn't need it. Like, you
right. So like
know,
at Max DRS, they could have played the DRS game with
yeah,
Checo.
right. It's like they could have done that stuff, but I don't think they did. And so that's the sort of thing where it's like, how is this allowed? Like, this seems, I guarantee you they're probably going to look at that rule a little further and they're
I
probably
was
going
gonna
to
say,
add
do
something.
you think there will be a rules change that closes that loophole?
I think there might be some sort of thing. And I think honestly all it should really be is that depending on the severity of the penalty, like if you get a 5-second penalty because you like deliberately crashed into somebody or you cheated in some way and you don't serve it, then yeah, I think the next race you should probably get a penalty.
Sure.
But if it's something that's like, you know, track limits, you
Yeah.
know, or, you know, maybe you slightly impeded somebody,
Yeah.
like I think that there's a severity level to it. Idris and I, it's an ongoing conversation we have because we still think that 5-second penalty sometimes is too harsh for
Mhm.
certain things, and there should be like I think that in what was it in like qualifying, like with the track limit thing, like they do in Austin, rather than it being like, oh, you get your lap time completely deleted, it's just like, no, just add a tenth onto it,
Yeah.
you know, or something like that. Because like that's enough that I think to like make it so that they're not out of the race completely.
Mm.
You know, maybe they could still make it to Q2, but like they have to work harder, or
I have a different take on track limits.
Okay.
My take is perhaps a really harsh take, but my take is if you leave the track, it shouldn't count at all. You should not be allowed to leave the track. The whole thing, I think, should be true with F1 is any of your car leaves the track, penalty, don't count it, delete the lap time, whatever it is. Like, the sport is who can go fastest around the track.
Yeah.
So my vote is like it shouldn't be you have to have one bit of rubber on the track for it to still count as the track. I think it needs to be all four wheels on the track all the time. It will slow things down a little bit, but I do think that's the sport. That's what I would draw.
I agree, honestly. I mean, that was my sentiment when I was seeing the Austria, like the craziness with deleting all those lap times, because I was like, well, yeah. I mean, like, they went off the track. Like, it's the limit of the thing. And what's funny is you don't see that in certain tracks like Singapore. You don't see that in Singapore. You know why? Because it's a wall. So there's, like, this psychological element that they know they can't go faster than that.
You can't exceed the track limits because your car is smashed, right?
Yeah, right.
That should apply equally across circuits. I think it should be a rule of, like, you cannot leave the track. It should always be a penalty to leave the track.
I think if there's anything that they can do in certain places, like that last turn coming out in Austria, the only thing I can imagine them doing is just extending the track a little bit more, making it more of a curve if drivers are really going to do that. But then you think of that, then what they're going to do, they're just going to go further. They're just going to go more out to that.
Their job is optimizing, right? Their job is to find the most optimal way that suits, they're driving in the track. I think, sure, you can have a conversation around, like, okay, there's two options. One, the cars have to slow down, but they all have to slow down, right? And, like, I think that would be just as fair as, like, extend the track. I think the thing that is frustrating is that it is track by track and it is corner by corner what the rules and regs are. And I think in general they would do best to have one consistent regulation, and my preference would be all four tires on the track.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, you have the red and yellow curbs, right? And I think, like, riding the curbs, I think is fine, but I think if you step over those curbs, that's where I think it should be the problem. If you're skateboarding on them,
cars are wide, so they can be on the track and past the curbs too. Yeah, like they can have different, parts.
Which I will say I am excited for when they're supposed to apparently be narrowing the wheelbase and the width of the cars a bit. I don't know if it's happening in 25 or 26, but they apparently have been working on doing that because I think these things are too wide.
It's hard to get your car around someone else.
They're so much bigger in person. Like that was the thing in Austin when I saw them. I was like, wow, they're way bigger than I thought they were.
They're huge. They're also so fast.
They are.
Actually, there are certain sports that are, like, much more fun to watch on TV.
Yeah.
Hockey is one, like, that's sometimes better because you can actually see what's happening on TV. Like, there's certain sports that are better on TV. F1 is better on TV. I always, whenever I've gone to a live race, the live races are electric and they're so fun and it's such an experience, but you cannot follow the race.
Yeah. Well, and a part of that is because the internet's not good enough to be able to follow live timing. Like when I'm sitting there on the track and I'm just like, well, no, I have no idea what's happening.
And, like, I was near a TV, but it's still hard to see. And, like, I got really lucky and I didn't have internet, but I had cell phone service where we watched the race. And so my boyfriend was texting me, like, this is what's happening. And that was the only way I was able to know, like, when people were closing in on each other, when passes were expected, when they happened on other parts of the track. It's it also might be because I'm not rich enough to buy a grandstand seat where you can actually see things and a TV and hear things, but
well, I think that's partly down to the racetracks. I think they should do a better job having more TVs and more speakers around because some of these tracks, like, I was really surprised that at Coda, the speaker systems that they had around the track, it basically sounded like it was like a Beatles concert in 1964. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, what's happening? Like, you guys should have good speakers, like, periodically around the track where people gather so they can hear what's happening, or some screen that's nearby, have some, excess. PIR is really good with that. I mean, there's only a few places you can be on the track at PAR, or you can watch it, but the big one is the first turn, and there's a screen right there. And so I could see living timing everything like going on, and so when like an accident happened or somebody went off, I saw it immediately. So that track is definitely a lot smaller, and so it's a lot more intimate, so you kind of can really see what's happening. But yeah, Coda is so big. It was just like, well, where did he come from? Like, where did he go? Like, I remember, yeah, Carlos crashed off that first turn, and we were just like, "Where's Carlos? Oh, he retired?" Like,
No. Oh,
nobody knew what
I will
happened.
say the F1 Race Guide app, like Formula One has an app, and
Mm,
if you can get it to load, it's a question of if you can get it to load.
right.
But they have live, you can watch the live timings on your phone, and they also have commentators like type. It's like watching like a Twitter feed almost, but like
Oh,
you see the play by play. So I was able to use this in Montreal. I had good enough service when we watched the Montreal Grand Prix. So the F1 Race Guide app is excellent for if you're in person, but if you're in a crowd and you can't get internet service, it's a moot
yeah,
point.
yeah. They need to bolster up. I mean, this is 2023 here, people. We need to have like some intense Wi-Fi towers and some better television screens to see, because yeah, we're just not getting anything. But
Agreed.
um, I did notice. I did see the Japanese track. A lot of the places where people are sitting down, it's literally just logs. Like,
Oh,
I don't know if you noticed that. I'd never noticed that before. They have their grandstands,
yeah.
which I think have individual seats rather than like the American aluminum football style.
More.
But there were two sections I saw where one of them was like stone steps, almost like a park
Yeah.
theater thing,
Oh,
and then the other one was just like wooden, like it was just like logs,
yeah.
and people just had chairs, and I'm just like,
Oh, that sounds
I,
nice.
it kind of sounds nice. I mean, so long as you have like a nice cushion, and I would assume that it's just first come
Yeah,
first serve. I mean, it's not like they have
that's
numbers
true.
carved into the wood log.
Right.
Yeah. Japan would be a race I think it would be a really exciting race to go to at some point in my life. That it
Singapore is my bucket list.
Oh,
Singapore is my
Singapore would be
bucket list.
insane.
But
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Japan. Yeah, we are here to talk about the Japanese Grand Prix. It would be spectacular to go to the Japanese race.
I
I'm
don't
sure it would be a very pleasant experience too. Like,
Oh yeah.
I bet logistically and operationally, like it was night
Mhm.
and day to go to the race in Montreal versus Coda. The Montreal race is public transit accessible and like walkable, and there's ample water. Like just some of the things that make a race experience, make or break a race experience. Montreal had down really well.
Mhm.
I am going to go out on a limb and guess that the Japanese race is also logistically delightful.
Mhm. I would say
I
so.
love
That's probably
all
true.
of the costumes. Like the
Oh my
Japanese
god,
fan
yeah.
culture is out of this world. I was eating up all the social media. Chanel and I were joking, like they would love us. They would love us in Japan. They would
They
love
would 100%. They would. I love that they get those little construction helmets and then they build the
Yeah,
little cars on them. They've been doing that for years, and it's like
yes,
it is a very Japanese thing. Like it is like quintessentially them. They just go
yes,
to the nines. Which, by the way, brings me
yes,
to the point.
yes.
Tell me about these new costumes you're cooking up.
Okay, so Chanel and I are not going to the US Grand Prix. I will be
Hmm.
going to the US Grand Prix with some friends.
Okay.
Believe it, I have other friends. They're from my college car team. Anyway, it'll be fun. But we decided we're gonna go to Vegas, and we
Mm.
are also not going to buy. We have not bought tickets to the race. We got a hotel room. We found a reasonably priced Vegas hotel room.
Okay.
Shocker. Um, and our game plan is to see what we can get. We'll see what we can get. If we have to watch the
Mm.
race on TV from our apartment, we'll be fine. At this point, we have some contacts and some friends in the teams. We think we'll be able to hang out with folks
Okay.
outside of the formal event. But also, all we need is one person with a few from a hotel room on the strip. Like we're scheming.
Okay.
But because we're going to Vegas, you guys can get the very first glance of our reveal. We are staying with McLaren.
Of
We talked
course.
about perhaps Beta Tori. Shonali came up with that, but the
Beta
Instagram handle's
Tor.
not available.
Yeah.
Um, if we play the game, right? We originally picked McLaren because we looked like Carlos and Lando at the
Uh-huh.
time. Lando and Daniel worked okay. If you look at the
Mm.
grid now, we make most sense as the current Williams lineup, which would make
Mm-hmm.
me Sergeant. Yikes.
No, no, no.
Anyway, we're sticking with McLaren this year, and we're making the Vegas promo
Oh,
jackets
oh my God.
from the video. So
Oh
this is
no.
the base. This is not dolled up at all. It has blue sleeves. It will have blue sleeves. We
Wow.
had a field day in a Joanne Fabrics the other day.
Oh my
But also,
gosh.
we're doing V2, really applying the engineering process to our race suits. We bought these like synthetic, like sweat pant material almost, like
Okay.
onesies. Our costumes are these onesies from Old Navy. They're
Mm.
$25. We bought four of them when we bought them. So we have two unassembled ones and two that we made. And our first draft, they're McLaren's race suits are gray. Ours are black. Like
Mm-hmm.
black is better. But anyway, the black with the orange up top, the orange stripe, the blue down on the leg, and then
Mm-hmm.
all the patches. We sewed all our patches on, but we needed to get the fabric that was orange up top.
Right.
Last time we did fabric paint, and we did like a layer of white fabric paint and then a couple layers of orange fabric paint. For whatever reason, the synthetic suits just eat up the fabric paint. Like it
Mm.
starts out vibrant and like fades to like gray over the
Oh
weekend.
wow. Okay.
So this year we are sewing orange fabric. We're sewing fabric onto them,
Oh, okay.
which will
Yeah.
not fade. And we are in the process of assembling the like big blocks of color. We're using like spray adhesive
Oh, okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
sewing the rim. So we're gonna have a much higher fidelity suit
Uh-huh.
this, which is
Wow.
honestly dangerous because our suits last time when you met us were barely holding their color. The patches, I cannot express the extent to which the patches were falling off, like visibly, only loosely sewn down, like falling off. They were made from
Uh-huh.
puffy paint. Like they were not, they were very DIY. We had a lot of people who were like, those look real. We're like, they do?
Yeah, I mean, when Idris and I saw him, we were just like, "Oh, look at that!" Like it was impressive. Like we were just like, "Holy shit!"
I think
Yeah.
if you looked, the overall picture was strong, and then if you looked too closely at any of the details, it was like, oh my god.
Well, that's the thing with a lot of things. I mean, like that happens in the guitar world a lot too, where it's just like people will have. There was a guy I remember who was a session musician, and he would spray his guitar a new color almost every gig, and he would
Oh
literally
wow.
just like he would just take the neck off, and he would
Yeah,
just spray it with some spray paint, and then just put it back on and reassemble it.
it's
And
funny.
from a distance, it was like, that's cool. He's got a yellow guitar. But then when you got right up close to it, you could see
Like,
all the layers of paint chipping off. It was looked like a jawbreaker where it like would break off huge chunks.
yeah.
And the funny thing about that too is that the guy was just playing a Hello Kitty guitar that he just sprayed over a bunch of times. So like, I was like that,
That's kind of
if the
rad.
effect works, then there you go. It's the same
Hurts.
with like RuPaul's Drag Race, like those drag queens, like when they're on stage and they have all the lights and stuff, like everything is really impressive to see as a whole thing. But if you get really close, like there's some there's not a lot of refinement. Like it's just been kind
Right.
of patched together with what they can do.
Got it. That's the
Um,
whole point. It's like you
yeah,
gotta find the threshold that is like passable and professional enough, and like the details of how you got there don't have to like the sum is greater than the parts in all
right.
of those cases, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, right. Have you
Yeah.
and Shonali talked about like which one are you going to be Oscar and she's going to be Norris, or is it going to be the other way around?
Lando. I've been studying him for years. I get to keep Lando. She has to be
Okay.
Oscar. I will say my hope with Oscar this whole time, like I've watched it happen over and over again where like you get a new driver. to like a rookie driver tends to be just kind of paralyzed
Mm-hmm.
by the spotlight.
Yeah.
Some of them, some of them come out swinging. Yuki came out swinging. He was ready. He did not temper his personality one bit when
No.
he got into Formula One. But like Stoffel Van Dorn, like you can see like a history of like young drivers that come in and are just like they're kind of just there for a minute, and their personalities emerge as they like become accustomed and like can relax in front of the cameras and stuff. We're seeing that a little bit from Oscar. We're also seeing that his humor is just super dry.
Yeah.
Like he's actually quite funny, and I didn't clock it for a long time. So he's winning me over, not just with the personality, but with the driving. Like he's showing that McLaren made the right call. He's also starting to relax. We're seeing what look like natural smiles from him, like capturing real candid photos instead of him like grimacing. He grimaced for the first half of the season. So yeah, I'm warming up to Oscar. I am sad for Shonali because, we had her as our highly charismatic drivers.
Yeah.
But we really did debate, like, are we going to hitch our wagon to McLaren? Or are we going to dress up like whichever lineup calls to us that season?
Yeah, it's all, I mean, there's I so much of it is also trying to come up with the name, like you said, like the Beta Tari. That
handle is taken. I think we would have done it, but the handle is taken.
There's so much of it is the name as much as it is like the costuming and the personalities. But and F1's always changing, so it's just like it's hard to find that sort of constant North Star. Yeah.
But we like McLaren. It took us, the Knockoff McLaren project was a 3-year project, and it's like how long it took to come from idea to fruition with the pandemic. So in that time, I did become quite attached to McLaren. And I think it really did lock in what will be a lifelong fandom of mine. Despite, like, they could lose they could lose Lando as well, and I think I would still hold a very strong affection for McLaren. I actually don't think I like Lando a lot, and I respect him as an athlete and a competitor, and the way he's grown and what he's been able to do with McLaren. Like I really do admire him, but I don't know if he would be my favorite driver at another team. But McLaren has really captured my heart.
Yeah, I feel like if Idris and I were to try and do this, he and I would probably, I feel like the perfect thing for him and I to do would be to just transport ourselves back to 2007 and recreate the McLaren outfits for Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, because there's like both our favorite drivers, and like there's also like the era of F1 that I think he and I are most we sort of have like it might be like our kind of our collective favorite era, I guess, is like the early 2000s, sort of thing. That I feel like would be a pretty sweet costume, because it's like,
that's all right. Here's what I think we need to do. You, me, Shonali, Idris need to go to a race. All 4 of us in costume. You guys go retro. We go contemporary.
That would be yes. That I think. Well, it's easier for us though too, because it's like it's unchanged. So like. You would have to be current, so we'd have to try and make sure we it have to be the perfect moment. We have to make sure that like Oscar and Norris are still in there, or there's not some big shakeup.
We have them until 2026. We have them.
We do have to. Okay, I'm gonna talk to it. I'm sure Idris is gonna hear this. I know he'll probably be 100% on board. We're just gonna have to figure out. We just need to get like. Yeah, you get some silvery race suits, some Vodafone logos. Some Santander, big Santander thing across the back, I think. Yeah, I think we could probably make that happen.
Make it happen.
I'll just we can do a thing where like I'm waiting in line to go to the bathroom or something, and like I just sit there and wait for him, like make some references to like all the weird turmoil they had when they were in the team together.
Can we talk about the spatting that's happening at following now I want to follow Lewis, but at Mercedes right now. The
Oh
George
my
and
God.
Lewis thing is fascinating to me. I
Yeah.
don't think people are paying I don't know if it, I am obsessed with how close the two are and how they've
Hmm.
been kind of, George has outqualified Lewis a couple times,
Yep.
which is quite surprising to me. But then in the races, Lewis seems to have the upper hand. Like
Hmm.
the two of them together battling it out last weekend and this weekend gave me a lot of hope for like, ooh, we might get some inter Mercedes
Hmm.
fighting again.
Yeah. I think so I think that if we're talking Mercedes inner fighting,
Yeah.
I think that like the Nico Rosberg Hamilton
Yeah.
battle, I
Yeah.
think was on a personal level that I don't think Hamilton's ever going to get to again because like they
Agreed.
were best friends,
Yeah.
right? So you have this suddenly like friends to frenemies to
Yeah.
enemies sort of
Yeah.
situation happening. And I think that the intensity of that battle was amplified with the fact that they were on top. Like they were
Yes.
the best team. So that
It was a
even that
competition for who wins the overall, like who wins the driver championship,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's more than just like inner team dominance.
Yeah.
And I think that like Bottas as Hamilton's teammate kind of had that personality where it's like Bottas can definitely fight for himself and advocate for himself. Like he's definitely
And he
not a,
did.
he
He
did.
disobeyed team orders
Yeah.
repeatedly in
Yeah,
his
it
time at Mercedes to do what he needed to do.
right. But he never like did anything to like try and like deliberately screw over Hamilton, or they didn't really have any like major coming togethers that would have been like ooh. But yeah, I think we're seeing like George. I think it's so much of it stemming from George cuz I think George
Yeah.
is desperate to put his foot into the sport as
Yes.
like this is like I'm here. Like I'm this is my, I'm
Partly.
ready to go.
I have loved George's desperation. Like,
Mhm.
let's talk
Yeah.
about a driver whose like heart is 1000% in what he's doing.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Feels such
completely.
big feelings, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, no, he definitely is like he's very opinionated on the radio too. Like and
Mhm.
he's so sarcastic. Which is just crazy to me that he can think to be sarcastic or come up with these like kind of sassy quips while also racing at the same time.
So British.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I also thought when Max called him a princess that he should have just leaned into that a little bit.
Oh, get it?
Um,
Smart.
I would have just like made princess merch and stuff like that
Oh
if I
yeah.
was George. Um, yeah, it's I'm a part of me is I am genuinely interested because I think that the sport does its best when there is a certain amount of drama and drive between drivers. When like I was really disappointed when like Max and Perez's whole thing was heating up, and then all of a sudden they're just like, no, we had conversations and like we're cool and it's fine now, and like there's no, and it's like no, like fight, get
Let him fight. Let him do
get
that.
yeah, it's just like take some risks, like try some stuff. Like I feel like Perez was kind of subdued by that a bit, and it's
He was definitely explicitly told to chill out and let Max win. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and there's nothing like, I don't know. I think you're right. I think that's one of the things about having two drivers per team that like is so thrilling and engaging about Formula One. It feels like a little bit like hockey. I'm bringing up hockey again, but like that's one of the wildest parts about hockey is that they're allowed to openly fight each other to an
Mhm.
extent. Like they're
Yeah.
allowed to just hit each other where that is not explicitly part of the sport. Like, and that is engaging and exciting and like really allows the emotions of
Mhm.
the viewer to rise and fall. And so
Right.
there's like this engaging experience. I think that's a strength of Formula One. That, and you're right, Red Bull squashed it. I'm loving watching it heat up at Mercedes, where
Mm.
there is explicitly no number one driver. George is actively challenging Hamilton, and so he
Yeah.
has a right to be like, "What are we gonna fight with each other? I'm faster." Team orders him. Like I'm loving watching George assert himself in the space, and
Yeah.
I think Lewis will never really take him back on because like Lewis is too good for that
Hmm.
almost. Like he's just
Yeah.
too transcended the need to like fight with his little teammate.
Right. It's a weird balance because like on the one hand, like you have team orders and you have the what's best for the team as far as the constructors championship, and you want to help each other, and you want to get the team to the best. But then you have the drivers aspect, and I think that's where that conflict really comes in, because each driver is fighting for their own championship at the same time. And it's a weird balance to strike, because I'm glad that like Mercedes is like, okay, you guys can race, just leave each other enough racing room, you
Yeah.
know. That's good.
Like
Like that's what you want to see, right? But at the same time, like you get instances where, like, last year where like Perez was racing for the second place and Max would not let him pass because he's like, oh, like, why, he knows why. It's just like, what?
uh
Like it's just like at that point it's just like, okay, if I was Perez, I'd be like, all right, fine, you know what, I'm gonna pass you on track, and if we get taking each other out, so you already got a championship, I got nothing to lose, let's go. Like
yeah.
that's what I would have been resigned to. I'm like, if I lose second over this, like, then I'm gonna make my point. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
And who does
trying
it
to.
look bad on? Max.
That looks bad
Checo
on Max. Yeah.
hard would have looked only good for Checo. I mean, we saw a request for team orders and an ultimate merit pass on track out of McLaren, right?
Right.
When Lando had pitted, I think, and Oscar was still out and he wanted to pass him this race, Lando was on the radio
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Oh, I'm faster. I'm on these newer tires.
Yeah.
When do I get to pass him?"
You're gonna
And
ruin my race. Yeah.
right. Where was this? This was at like I have it all written down. Like lap 26, lap 27. Lando's
Yeah.
like, "Let me go," and the commentators were like, "Oh, that's nice. Like, it sounds like Oscar hasn't heard that he's supposed to let Lando through." And I think when
Right.
Lando passed him, it was on merit, not because the team told Oscar to get out of the way. And that's what I want to see as well. I want to see the racing be racing as much as is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love the team strategy. I love when someone gives their teammate a tow in qualifying. I loved watching the inter-team strategy between Carlos and Lando, where he's pulling Lando up along to hold the Mercedes at bay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff is delightful, and so I think there's room for all of it. And
Yeah.
it's just very delicate balancing act to
It
like
is.
engaging.
One thing I did think was fascinating too was Ferrari threw out a pit strategy dummy out there. Did you see that? They're just like, like pit to cover McLaren, pit to cover McLaren,
Opposite,
and then
yeah.
they didn't come in and pit, and they were just like, oh, yep, no, they were trying to throw him off the game. Those are, when that happens, it's kind of hilarious.
It is. I also loved McLaren asking Oscar about like his tire strategy, where it's like, okay, Oscar, if there's a safety car, this was towards the end of the race. Oscar, if there's a safety car, you can come in for softs, but you lose 3 places. Do you want it? I
Yeah.
love watching them like openly have those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
because it's open to everyone, right? Like
Right.
that just as well could have been McLaren planting that concept,
Yeah.
whether or not they do it. Like I do love all of that.
One thing one thing that they changed in qualifying a couple of races ago, and I'm curious to get your opinion on it because I actually kind of like it. Do you see how they did that thing where in Q1 they only ran the hard tire, Q2 they only ran the medium tire, and then Q3 they only did the soft tire? What do you think about that format? I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I love whenever like Formula One is always playing with tires,
Yeah.
right? I loved when whatever tire you ran Q2 on, you had to start the race on. Like I enjoy all of the different permutations.
Mhm.
But I think one of the things that is interesting is I think in general we're seeing more running on a wider range of tires. We're not seeing the teams all take the same tire strategy. I
Yeah.
think forcing the same tire strategy for qualifying is also a way to force their hand. If you've got a
Mhm.
car that's super optimized for one tire and not the other,
Right.
you can't rely on that anymore. So no, I think it's been really fun.
Yeah, there's all these different suggestions of how the qualifying can change. I know that I think Fernando said that the qualifying is setup is stale and needs to be updated. He thinks that they should do like a one shot qualifying thing, which I think logistically might be better, because then way you don't have to worry about people like being stuck on track, like blocking each other. But as we see, the track evolves, so then the premium is whoever gets the last, is the fastest. Maybe you do a reverse version of it. I don't it's tough to say, because
reverse from the final order of the prior race,
something like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for them trying different things, and so I'm whatever they're gonna try.
Yeah, if it was one car out at a time, would the track evolve the same way? I don't think so.
That's a good point. I don't think it would either, because you're not laying down as much rubber. Because I would be willing to bet that the friction from the cars running over the track and the rubber being layered down is going to have more of a profound effect than the temperature ambiently of the air and like the sun. So
that much. Like the track evolution cannot be explained by the thermal, unless it's the thermal property of like the actual rubber of the cars heating up the track. That's the only thing that can't be it can't
just be the sun. Yeah. So
a lot of times they're cooling, right? They should be cooling throughout the session.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you'd think. Yeah. I'm curious to see. I mean, it'd be something they should try. I'm curious to see what they do next year, because of course they're going to inevitably try some different stuff next year to see what happens. But yeah. Well, let's
the format. That they're experimenting with the format as much as they're experimenting with the vehicles.
Oh yeah, no, completely. That's the only thing you can do to really try and continue to liven things up, as you go along. Well, let's just do a little wrap up here then of Japan. Overall, what are I guess I call this segment this is the podium vibes segment. So overall, what is your whole vibe that you got from Japan? Like, what were the biggest vibes you got out of it? What was the thing that stuck most in your mind after watching it? What were your thoughts?
One of the thoughts I had was like, there was a lot of overtaking and a lot of shuffling of orders. Like, I know that in a lot of ways, like the race kind of shook out the same way that qualifying kind of shook out. Like it wasn't like Singapore, where like you had like a very active battle for the podium the same way. And at the same time, so much of what F1 has set out to improve is having lots of on-track battles and passing. And because everyone was running different tire strategies, that wound up happening, right? Because we had the safety pitting under safety car, pitting without safety car, 2-stop, 3-stop, 4-stop, like check out in and out. There was like plenty of interesting stuff going on throughout the race. So I found myself quite engaged through the whole thing. The friends I watched with had different. One of them at lap 6 was like, time for my nap. I was like, oh God, really? Like it's just getting good. Like they're just doing the safety car restart.
Oh yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I also always enjoy a race where the McLarens are doing well. Riding high the whole race for that reason.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I had same feelings. Very scrappy race. I mean, there was a lot of attrition. There was like 5 racers that retired, 5 cars that retired. And I think a lot of that stemmed from that first race incident. I think a lot of them took damage and then they just couldn't recover from it. A lot of passing. This track is very good with passing. There's a lot of places that you can unexpectedly pass somebody. It's got quite a few passing opportunities, which I do not like when tracks is like there's only have 1 or 2 places that you can pass. And like Monaco's like that.
They're usually the DRS straights. Like there was a lot of passing in corners and people lunging into corners, or pushing someone to cover in one turn, and it puts them at a suboptimal entrance into the next corner. Like the racing was racing. It wasn't just
and also like you said, the pit strategies were really fascinating to watch how they they were you know, who was coming in, like, you know, Fernando Alonso getting pinned early and then having to pick up the pieces from that, or like you know, somebody trying the undercut and the overcuts were coming into play, where they were trying out their different things, and then, you know, Russell trying a one-stop strategy rather than like a 2 or 3 like everybody else was. Definitely fascinating, definitely interesting in a way that's like, I wish every race was like this. And like, you're 100% right, it was very engaging. I mean, I started it at midnight last night, and I was pretty much wide awake through the whole thing except for maybe the last 5 laps, and like Lauren had already passed out on the couch, and I was just like, I gotta finish this race, you know.
Last little bit, yeah.
But most of it I was just like, wow, like, oh my god, like, what's happening here? I think yeah, Lauren just texted me my notes because I left them. But there's just a lot of, like, you know, really close calls with Lewis and George.
Yes.
Bottas getting pitched by Logan Sargent, Perez coming back, the Ferrari pit dummy.
Checo Magnussen, and he had to do that, like, he was facing the wrong direction, had to do that beautiful spin recovery onto the track. Like, there was a lot of drama. I loved the bit at the end where they told, like, they were trying to pull Carlos's DRS strategy out for George and Lewis, and they were like, Lewis, do the DRS thing, and he was like, not gonna do it. I can't, he's too slow. Like, I loved watching that. Like, there was plenty of intrigue kind of at every stage of the race, and like across multiple teams. So yeah, it was
one thing. I don't know if you noticed this, at the end, the Red Bull team was really excited to win the Constructors Championship, which, you know, by the way, congratulations to them.
Congrats.
But Christian Horner, he was just kind of like, he didn't really, I didn't see like a lot of reaction out of him. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like even Max is just like, okay, yeah, good job, we did good, and it's just like, I just like, I remember like, every time like Mercedes won like a thing, it was just like, yeah, like they were so stoked for it.
They worked for it.
yeah, it just, I don't know, there was something. There was something about the subdued celebration from the Red Bull pit wall specifically that I was like, what's going on? Like, this feels really strange. Like, you guys just won the Constructors Championship. Like, aren't you like, look at your pit crew. Like, they're freaking out. Like, you know, I don't know. I mean, it was a little off to me. It was a little off-putting to me. And that I think kind of coincides with like when you're just so dominant and you're just expecting it to happen. Then all of a sudden it just, you know.
The vibes were weird. I expected more out of McLaren too, to be honest. It was Oscar's first podium, like double podium, big deal. Like, it was like a pat on the helmet from Zaddy Zach, and like,
yeah,
it kind of,
the engineers were going nuts. Oh,
ran in their spot all race. Like, that shook out early, and they just had to execute, and it like wasn't that hard for any. Like, it was like not a risky race, not a difficult race. I don't know, but I was like, I was feeling really hyped for the podium, and was just like, oh, they're just sitting in the room. Okay, now they're walking up to the podium. Oh, okay, they're doing a little champagne spray. They're like, seem happy, but like, it's the thing you have to do, so I don't buy it. Like, it was just a little off.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with Max, you know, if he, you know, when he clinches the title. I'm going to say when he clinches the title, because usually when I assume that when I say something like that out loud, it happens, and it actually doesn't happen. So that's my way of manifesting it, is by saying that he's going to do it. He apparently is capable of winning it at the Qatar sprint race.
Oh my god, of course he is. I was going to say, like, it feels impossible for him to not win.
I mean, it's the only way that he wouldn't win is if he literally retires the rest of the rest of the season. Like, if he has mechanical failure and retires the rest of the season, is the only way that he's not going to win it. And then, you know, Perez and Alonso and Hamilton would have to be like on the podiums. The likelihood of that, very remote.
Very low. We can dream, though.
But it's not impossible.
Can
you
you
know?
imagine the rest of the season if it happens?
Oh my god, like I would love to peek into an alternative reality where that has happened, mostly because I just want to see how Max reacts to it. Like, would he just quit afterward? Like, what would he do? Would he be mad? Would he be confused? Would he be depressed? Like, what would happen to that man?
I almost think we'd get no reaction, the true psychopath reaction. Like, I don't know what we'd get. I don't know.
True psychopath.
Like the nothing. The like, yeah, it happened.
um,
Like,
well,
I don't
that was an
know.
interesting season. Good job, guys. Like, are you okay,
We'll do it
Max?
again next year.
I
It's like,
am fine.
what? Are you okay? I don't
Oh
know.
man. Yeah, see, that's the funny thing though. It's just like I always like to tell people. It's like, well, like they were because people were saying that Max, just go home. Like, and that was after like 5 races. I'm like, guys, this is like 2 races this season. Like, there's plenty of opportunity for things to happen, and
Yeah.
obviously it took to Singapore before we got another race winner. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
But we also like, I don't know, something that is always true about Formula One is that like there's always going to be scraps in the middle of the field, right? So
mhm.
even if Max wins the whole thing in the sprint race, like we got a lot that can still shake out that has very real consequences for the drivers, but also for the funding that the teams get next year, and
Yep.
it's going to change, and the wind tunnel time and the development cycle. Like there's still a lot to be determined in the
Yes.
sport. So I'm in
Very
for
much
it.
so.
I'm in for it.
Yeah, no, very much so. I'm excited to see how things shake out, and who knows? The rule change in 26 could completely derail Red Bull. I mean, I think they're bound to sort of stay close to the top. It's really just a matter of if somebody else can figure it out. I think that Mercedes, if they fix the zero side pod thing and just go to a different concept next year, I would be willing to bet that they can put themselves back kind of close because we see how much development they've gotten, how close they've gotten this time.
Agreed. And I really want an eighth world championship for Lewis.
I do too. I do
I want
too.
it.
I want an eighth world championship for Lewis. I also want McLaren to fight for it too. I want
Me
them to be back in their winning ways. I want Williams to be back in their winning ways. I want to see a
too.
McLaren Williams like title fight is what I want to see.
That would be a dream come true, like a classic era.
Yeah, glow up of the century is what that is. Also,
Yeah.
I was gonna say we talk about McLaren glowing up and Aston Martin. What is the equivalent of glowing down? Is that like a thing, like a glow down? Like what's the opposite of a
Explain
glow
it.
up?
All of my things. I don't think there's a cute catchphrase for it, and I think a lot of them are like cruel or fat phobic, and so I just
Oh
think
yeah,
work, Like I think that's always the thing people
yeah,
say, and I don't like it. Like I'm not here for that. I don't think that's
yeah,
the thing. So we'll call it a glow down. It's really a performance thing.
yeah, yeah. It really is well, yeah, it really is. I mean, the reliability has been fine. I mean, apart from Stroll's wing breaking apparently at this race, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm
It
gonna
just stays stagnant where everyone else has grown.
I'm gonna try and do as the young people out there say, a manifest moment,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a Max beefing it, and so much that it makes the title clinching be the last race of the season again.
Love that.
I want to manifest that in 2026, Williams is back up towards the top, fighting with McLaren for the next for the world championship. I also
Oh,
also
my
a part.
26 manifest moment is that we have, yeah, the battle is a three-way battle between Mercedes, McLaren, and Williams. That's what I want.
I kind of, and I've kind of said this before, I kind of have this romantic thought of McLaren coming back up on top and having Lewis Hamilton rejoin McLaren for like 1 or 2 more seasons before he retires.
Oh,
That
that'd be
feels like, yeah, that feels like That feels like a special thing to happen. I feel like
Yeah.
that would be. And then Mick
You know,
Schumacher
Alonso,
taking.
put him and Alonso both back there.
Well, I want to see Alonso win a championship for Aston Martin. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
Yeah.
this
That'd
is
be rad.
the closest that we're going to get. I think that if it doesn't happen by 25, he might just be like, well, you know,
Do you think
retire.
Seb is coming back? Not to throw a total wrench as we're wrapping, but Seb was there this weekend and like seemed quite blissful.
Mm. Um, it's tough to say. I like to see him come back. Yes. Do I think he's going to? Um, at this point, with the amount of activity that he's doing outside of the sport, trying to promote like his environmental causes and stuff, which is, I mean, love to see it. I
Yeah,
mean,
huge.
total king.
Big win.
Um, I think that there's probably a high chance that he's not going to, as much as I would love it, because I think that he should. I think that it would be really awesome to see him. I think if Max retires and they just bring Danny back up, like it'd be interesting to have Danny and Vettel back in there, or have Vettel race for Red Bull again. Like if Red Bull starts to come down the order again and they need somebody to jump back in, like
Oh,
Vettel
that's
showing back up to like bring them back up to snuff might be a fun thing to see.
I was
He's
thinking we put him in Lance's seat and we have like two world champions try to revive
Ooh.
us.
Oh, that would be like the dream team. Ooh.
That's a movie I'd watch, right? Like the two kind of can you count them out, aging out
Mm-hmm.
of the sport guys, like come back. Seb is another driver that's just such an engineer. Like
Mm-hmm.
those two developing Aston
Oh.
and then like kicking ass and taking names would be like such a riveting season. So that's
It's
my other manifest moment.
it's not like Daddy Warbucks doesn't have the money to pay him.
Seb doesn't need the money.
And Seb doesn't need the money. But like but you know what? Like if he was gonna pay him enough to be like, hey, like here we go. Oh man, that would be epic.
I
Oh
do.
my god. I would buy all the merch. I mean, I
Me
have my
too.
Alonso shirt, but I would buy a Vettel one, and like I'd have all.
I'd be
I
all
would
in.
be
Aston could win me that way. This is the Aston green, but it's actually a Daniel Ricciardo Enchante sweatshirt.
nice.
Um,
I bought
Aston could,
I bought my Aston Alonso shirt. I don't know where it is though. I'm super excited about it though. I've like it's like the first like F1 merch outside of this that I've actually like
nice.
owned, and I'm also really happy that I actually have the Lando hat and not the Danny hat. At first, when I got it, I was like, I want the Danny hat, but now I'm actually glad I have got the Lando hat. So
Yeah,
it
it's
worked
got the
out perfect. So
longevity. Lando,
yeah,
and I think Lando. There's another thing I want. I want a Lando World Championship with McLaren.
yeah.
Like they picked him and like he chose them back, and it feels like they actually really are synced and tied,
Mm-hmm.
McLaren and Lando. And like if we're manifesting McLaren competing for world championship, I want it. I
Yeah,
want
I say McLaren wins the championship in 25,
Okay.
and Williams kind of brings it back up into the midfield after re-signing Mick, and
Cool.
then 2026 is McLaren and Williams Mick versus Lando for the championship.
Oh, okay, my heart. We're writing a fanfic.
We're writing a fanfic here.
We gotta run like a D&D campaign off of that premise.
Ooh, like underdogs, yeah. Oh yeah, I love it. I actually did a briefly was in a campaign. It was actually one of my more favorite ideas, and it was the group of us were reformed villains who were joined an organization that was called. It was the what was it? The acronym was ABBA. And so there were 4 elves that were in a singing group that were the ones that were trying to reform us, and it was like
Yeah.
the awful bad something. I forget what the acronym was, but yeah, each of us were villains, and basically through some circumstance we had to stop. We were like, stop being villains. So like my character was a person who was a kind of a dark Indiana Jones type, where like I hunted dark artifacts to sell on like the black market. But then my character was essentially I was abducted by like these entities from a different dimension who wanted me to basically be their emissary in this plane of existence. And what they did was, part of their gifts that they bestowed upon me was a symbiont that was like to be like kind of a connection between me and them. And the symbiont basically manifested itself into the life form that was nearest to me, and that just happened to be my my pet toucan that was on my shoulder. And so what happened was our minds melded, and so like and my toucan gained sentience basically and became the symbiote. And so my character only talked through the toucan.
It's funny.
So like my character was like really aggressive and like kind of like this like sort of like hunter guy, but then the toucan was like, "Hey guys, what's up?" And he would only talk.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing was like, because the toucan was such a good-natured thing, like all of a sudden my character didn't know how to not be he didn't know how to be a villain anymore, so like he had to find a new path.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. I find that like with a lot of game systems and things of that nature, the best thing to do is just to put yourself in a zone that you're not comfortable with, or to give yourself restrictions. I think everybody's obsessed with being like the best version of this. Like, I want to do all the things. It's like, no, just pick a specialty and pick some flaws, and you're gonna have way more fun.
Right. Oh, I love that. That's super fun.
Are you in a D&D group right now?
No.
Oh. I'm playing one with my brother, and like Lauren joined us, so like that's kind of ongoing. My current character is a half orc barbarian who's also a carpenter. And so like he's sort of trying to channel his rage into crafting things, as opposed to like just like, because it was like reckless as a child. It's been really fun, and I'm really excited to play some more. Yeah, maybe we need to have a USGP gang D&D group going. We
got to think about it, but I like that idea a lot. I know Shonali would be into it if she has any free time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, poor Shonali.
I know, she's so busy. But I do think that could be a very fun little side quest or like off-season game.
Oh yeah. Off-season. Oh man, that would be incredible. Oh my god. Okay, I'm already thinking about it.
All right. I'll plant that idea. I'll leave you that gift.
Okay. Well, okay. Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks for listening to F1 or F Off. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up, find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X at F1 or F Off. You can also email us at F1 or F Off podcast@gmail.com. Please give us a 5-star review. Or as Idris and I like to say, you can also do 4 or 3.5, but no less than that. Just be honest with it. Anywhere you listen to your podcast, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. It really helps us out a lot. Share it with your friends, share it with your family. Tiernan, who should we share our podcast to? Give us somebody.
DM your favorite IndyCar driver.
There you go. Listeners, yeah, let your IndyCar drivers know. Whether it's some Chip Ganassi action or some Andretti action, let us know, because like that's accessible.
Slide into Pato's DMs.
Just slide into Pato's DMs. We already gave him a friendship bracelet that he should be down. Yeah, I think if anybody was probably going to listen to it, it'd probably be Pato. So you might be onto something. So, Tiernan, thank you so much for joining me on the pod today. I really appreciate it. As much as I miss Idris, I equally enjoy, having you on. And like I said, open invitation. Anytime you want to come on. You and Shonali were the first ones I thought of to possibly have on as a guest host, and anytime you want to be on the podcast, you're always
welcome. Don't tempt us. I'm doing a non-hostile takeover.
It just slowly churns into, it's just like Idris and I are the guest hosts all of a sudden. Here's the password, just take over.
Yeah, I don't want to take it from you. We need your voices in the space.
All right, I appreciate it.
I value you guys both. So it's if anything, I'll just ride your tailcoats to success.
Well, you won't have to ride any tickles. We're gonna hoist you up above our heads
Do
as
it
we
together.
ascend. So this
We're
is
gonna do it
what's gonna
together.
happen. Do it
I love
together.
it.
That's
Appreciate
right.